right, everyone. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. Also, thank you for people who are watching on Twitch as well. My name is Tavian Napier. I'm the Assistant Director for the Esports program and the arena. Tonight, I'm super excited. I'm going to try to contain my excitement for tonight, but it's a near and dear topic for me, so I'm going to be definitely containing some excitement. You'll probably hear it as I come out. But this event is called the Esports Performance and Wellbeing event. Again, that's something that's really important to me, but the state of well-being, for those who don't know, it's a state of being happy, healthy, or comfortable. This is a topic that I just absolutely love, right? I've been spending years of my life trying to improve my own process in order to better myself. And in doing that, I found a love for esports and people who wanted to get better at games. That said, though, I want to give a little bit of information about how tonight's going to run. First off, we'll have a short speech from Edward Cleland. He's going to go over what he wants to talk about, but then after that, we're going to have a live discussion. You can kind of think of it as a live podcast of sorts. We're going to dig into the topics that he talks about, some of the topics that I'm very passionate about and very curious about, and then we're also, after that, going to take a short break and do a Q&A. So that way, if you guys have questions, we have a microphone right here for the Q&A portion. We also have people who submitted questions ahead of time, and then also if you're watching on Twitch, you can submit questions, and our moderators will go ahead and check that out as well. So go ahead, let our moderators know about that, and we can get questions if we have extra time for that as well. So with that said, for those who don't know who Edward Cleland is, he is a well-respected Bronco. He graduated from Western Michigan University for his bachelor's, but he carved out a significant place in the esports industry and has, I think, done some amazing work. He's worked with some of the top teams in the world, teams like G2, M80, 100 Thieves, NRG. If you don't know those teams, then I'm sorry, but if you do know those teams, you know how big that is. Think of it like the Chicago Bulls, really huge teams, essentially. But with that said, please welcome me with Edward Cleland today. Please give a round of applause.
Hello, everyone. My name is Edward Cleland. Grateful to be here with you tonight. Want to start off by thanking Tavian and also congratulating him and the Western Michigan University Esports Department. So thank you so much for all your hard work, Tavian. We appreciate you and your staff. Tonight we're going to be talking about two specific topics. The first topic is human performance. And as I look around the room, I see a bunch of humans in the room. And so although we're going to be focusing on professional video gaming and esports and how human performance applies to that, I ask you to not only participate tonight by being here in attendance, but also, if you could, try to perhaps selfishly think about the topics that we're talking about and see if there's anything that you can apply to your own life, to see if you can improve your performance, whether you're a gamer yourself or if you're a parent or whoever you happen to be. Consider yourself a bit of a performer and try to see if some of these lessons that we're going to talk about tonight can be applied to your own life. I want to paint a picture for you. So I'd like to ask you each to pretend you're a professional video gamer. And let's pretend that you just woke up, you're in a hotel room on the other side of the planet. You look around your room, you realize your belongings are kind of scattered in the room. You've been there for more than 10 days already. And you have the awareness that tonight is an arena match. Not just any old regular match that you've played. Tonight you're playing in front of thousands of fans in what is a sold-out arena on the other side of the planet. And you wake up with this knowing. And when you first wake up, you check in with yourself, you realize, I didn't really sleep that well last night, and today doesn't feel like a normal day to you. You go and look at your phone and you realize in about 90 minutes, you have to show up in your team practice room. So you're at the top floor of this hotel. Your practice room's down on the 5th floor. It's got your team's logo on the hotel room door. You look at your phone and you see a couple messages from family. They're on the other side of the planet. You reply to those. And then you see your teammates are already messaging you. Perhaps your performance practitioner, such as myself, went for a run that morning, said, who wants to join me outside? Your coach and your in-game leader are off getting coffee already, and some of your teammates are seeing if you want to go to breakfast. You know you have 90 minutes from right now to show up in the practice room, and I want you to think about how you get ready for your day of work. These 90 minutes go by quickly. You show up to your practice room. You have a sense that something big is about to happen, And as a team, you're going to spend about 90 minutes talking about your strategy for the day. And some of this has to do with the fact that there's going to be a van downstairs in about an hour to take you to the venue, to this big arena where everyone's going to be in the audience screaming your name and booing you if you don't play well. You're sitting with your teammates in this practice room, going over theory, going over everything that you're going to do for the day. You head outside together as a team. You do some activities. We activate our eyes. We activate our voices. We start moving our bodies together. And we're getting ready for a big match. Once we're done with the theory, they send you back to your hotel room. You've got about 20 minutes before you need to be downstairs in your jersey. You throw on your jersey and you do the last few preparation ideas. Maybe you meditate. Maybe you take another shower or get ready. Your bag is packed and you're heading down to the lobby. Now you get down to this lobby and there's fans already waiting for you. You're looking around for your teammates and an administrator comes running up to you and says, "Are you Justin?" And they look on their note card and they see your name on there. They make sure you've got your badge on. They hustle you into this van and the van's gonna drive you to the venue. You're sitting in a van now, all of your teammates and you bumping music, having a good time. Everything feels lighthearted and fun. The van door slides open and there's cameras right in your face. You walk through and scan your badge and a team manager says, "Follow me." They're gonna lead you down to the room you're gonna sit in before your match. All of a sudden you hear in the stadium screaming and shouting. The match that's happening before yours, a big play must have just happened. And you don't know who or what just happened, but you can hear the audience, you can hear the screaming, and you feel it. You're gonna be on a stage, which is different than playing at home. You're gonna be playing in front of thousands of fans, which is different than playing in your pajamas or just in the comfort of your own confines. You go and sit into this room, and they say, "You're gonna go to the stage in about 10 minutes." But they pop their head back in about 2 minutes later and say, "We're ready for you. Go get your computer set up." You grab all your belongings and walk out to the stage. You start setting up. But it's not just setting up the computer. You gotta crawl underneath and plug in your mouse. You gotta plug in your keyboard. So now you're crawling around on the stage. They pull you off the stage and say, "Okay, now we're gonna do a walkout." And so now you, a video gamer, are gonna walk out into a packed arena. They're gonna put your name alone on the big scoreboard, and they're gonna announce your name as you come walking out to the stage. And imagine how this might make you feel as a gamer to have to go through that. You head out, you sit down at the computer, and you start warming up. You look at your teammates, notice one of them tapping their foot more than usual. Your coach is a little excited, he's walking around and shuffling. You yourself are looking over and the opponent you're gonna play, they look like they're ready to play you. You see a fan in the audience that's screaming at you for an autograph while you're trying to warm up. And then we have a team huddle. The team huddle, your coach sits there and tells you exactly what he wants to see from you today. Your captain gives you some motivation, and now it's time to sit down and do something that you felt confident doing at home in your room or in a practice room, and you have to do it in front of thousands of people, not only for fun now, but for your career. And the outcome of this match is going to be a big deal. It's going to change how much money you make, whether or not you get death threats the next day in your DMs on Twitter, and that's not hyperbole. You will get death threats the next day if you don't play well today. And you're going to have to go out there and perform. Now, I want you to think you just sat down at the computer and went through all of that. And how do you respond? That's what we're here to talk about tonight. Everything that the player does leading up to that moment, everything the individual does as a person, everything that gamer does as a gamer, everything that team does as a team leading up to that moment will impact the outcome of this match. And so when we're talking about human performance, and especially in professional video gaming, we're talking about the environment, that's noticing the lights, the crowd, the stage, the PCs, everything that's around you, the environment literally that you're in, the culture that you're in, traveling the world. This isn't playing from your home. This is playing out of a hotel and getting ready out of a hotel and living that type of lifestyle. We're talking about living that lifestyle. The professional lifestyle of a pro gamer is very different than any other type of gamer, certainly. These guys travel, several of my teams travel more than professional athletes. They're on the road more than baseball players or basketball players. They're living out of suitcases. And that may sound fun until you do it for several months on end, and you're running out of laundry, and you don't even remember what it's like to hang out with friends or family because all you're doing is working and playing the game. So environment, lifestyle, all of the topics in mental health that come up in performance mental health, nutrition. You're sitting there getting ready to play and they delay the match for 45 minutes because the team in front of you went to a best of 3 and they're going to a third map instead of just playing the 2-0 in the first 2. So now everything you did has to be delayed for another 40 minutes. In traditional athletics, this would be a big problem. Runner would be upset if they didn't time their nutrition to the minute. In professional video gaming, you're just expected to do this. And then when you sit down at the server, you better be full focus and full energy, because we're not talking about missing by an inch and being okay. In video gaming, there's no margins. You're hitting your shots or you're not. So absolutely everything that we do leading up to that moment is going to represent itself on the server. Everything that we do individually, everything that we do as a gamer to prepare ourselves professionally, everything we do with our teammates to prepare ourselves to do something together, in every single moment that we have to respond to what we're experiencing. By show of hands, how many gamers do I have in this room tonight? Beautiful, majority, okay. And hopefully every hand goes up. By show of hands, how many people here care about a gamer? You could put your hand up too. I know you in the back. You got some gamers in your life too. Okay, good. I want you to think about the type of things that are involved with the gamer that you're thinking about for them getting ready to game. And obviously that's going to be quite different than the professional level. Just like being an amateur baseball player is going to be different than professional level in baseball, or a CEO might get ready different than, say, someone who doesn't feel like they have as much of responsibilities. But absolutely everything that we do is going to be reflected on that server. So I look forward tonight to having some conversation. Tavian and I are going to have a back and forth kind of a podcast style and discuss many of the mental health components, the nutrition and lifestyle, the rituals. And I do please invite you to participate in this conversation, especially for those of you that are gamers. Make sure that you walk out tonight with something that feels personal for you, that you can take and improve your own gaming experience with. This next generation of gamers cares a tremendous amount about their health and wellness. When I first began in professional video gaming, the idea of having a practitioner like me with you on site was very limited. And it was almost a surprise when an organization seemed like they were in support of having someone such as myself with them. And now you're seeing all of the top teams have someone that's focused on their performance and their health and wellness, whether that is a psychologist, mental health coach, someone in physical health or nutrition. So there's many different categories we're going to get to dive into tonight, and I look forward to the conversation with you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you for that, by the way. Oh, man. Okay, so I want to check in with you because it's been a while since we talked. It's been like 2 years since we've talked, I think.
I think so, yeah.
So a couple of introductory questions I have for you I've been curious about is, how has the world of mind-body esports been for you in the last 2 years? Like, has things changed? Have you learned anything new? Like, what's that been like?
That's a good question. We've seen a course correction, I'd say, in professional esports and the investing at that level. We've seen a lot of changes in terms of teams that are in professional esports. We had what we call the esports winter. A lot of teams decided to step away from esports or at least pare down their offerings and really focus into certain games. So for us as a company, we've kind of narrowed in a lot of our focus as well. We were working with, I think maybe 4 or 5 teams the last time we spoke. We're now focused in on more of 2 different organizations that we're working with. So we're a little bit more dialed in, and the hands-on approach has gone up a little bit, I'd say. Less consulting, more time in the weeds with the teams, and really being hands-on, I'd say.
Okay, all right, yeah. And then in that time, since we've last spoke, like, what's one major thing that maybe you've learned that like really impacted how you work with your team or your players?
I would say maybe even more than what I've learned, I would say that the culture altogether is advancing quickly. Where we were seeing certain players on teams that weren't interested in weren't interested in health and wellness topics. I would say all teams at this point that I'm looking at have some form of health and wellness practice. The individuals seem to be a lot more bought into it. Have certainly seen things like junk food or fitness really change a lot in the last 2 years. Even including the offerings at the events seem to be much more health conscientious. So I think we're continuing to see a shift and an evolution into health and wellness in esports.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good thing. I think that's great.
That's a great thing. Yeah,
it's good job security too.
Yeah, well, that part too. Yeah, it's not bad for work, and it's not bad for everyone involved. But yeah, I think it's kind of a natural progression too. When I first started, you heard a lot of the gamers almost say like, "I don't know what got me here. I don't have health practices that I'm sustaining." And so a lot of that was exploratory with them, and I think now it's most of the gamers that I'm meeting now at this point have some form of health and wellness practice, and we're expounding upon that instead of being like a fresh start with them.
Nice. Follow-up question I just thought about is how, if at all, has the perspective on meditation changed in the U.S.?
I would say we're continuing to see a bigger interest in mindfulness subject matter in general. And certainly meditation is a part of that. You've also seen a lot of the top tier gamers that are meditating before match. Some of them, my clients and former clients, and they're having tremendous success, and they're talking about that. They're talking about what a mindfulness practice or mindfulness and meditation is doing for them, especially before matches. I think you're seeing a lot more of that now, and the broadcast is highlighting that too. I think before the match starts, you're seeing a lot of guys laying back in their chair, and the broadcast isn't even really memeing it. They're just kind of saying, here's a player that's getting mindfully ready for the match. People seem to be really open on this. I think sometimes we say, well, we have a young male demographic. They're not going to be open to mindfulness and meditation and these health practices. And I found quite the contrary. I think they're very interested in it. They all have some awareness of what their breath is going through when they're gaming. And they know that having a breath practice while they're gaming seems to be helpful.
Yeah, so people who know me know I'm really big into fighting games. And there's a couple of pro players that I followed over the years. One is a Japanese player named Takedo, who he became very well known for like meditating before his matches and stuff. And you could see the shift of people making memes out of it until actually like accepting it as something normal. And then there's an American player. His real name is Michael, but his gamer tag is Samurai. And he was one of the few, like, only American players I've ever seen actually meditating, mid-match, like trying to compose himself. And I actually got the chance to interview him and talk a little bit about that. And it's really fascinating how, people who now, like this guy is very calm, very collected. He's like one of the most composed players. Had a background of like anger and frustration, and just seeing how things like meditation or mindfulness can really impact someone and how they are able to think a little bit more clearly.
I mean, anger is a very natural response. I just led a men's Movember health event for Team Liquid last week. We're going to be doing one for the community at the end of this month, so maybe tune into that. But, we were talking a lot about anger and how anger is a very natural male reaction. For any type of emotion that we're experiencing, anger will come out. So if we're feeling frustrated with ourselves, expectations aren't being met, anger is a very natural emotion to come out. So. But yeah, I do find it interesting that mindfulness is being used now. Meditation, at the heart of it, you're exercising the parasympathetic response system. So we're becoming calmer and more relaxed by meditating. And in those moments, we have to, the parasympathetic is that fight and flight. And so meditation and breath work is probably the easiest way to quickly, I mean, if everyone in this room just simply made their exhale longer than your inhale, you're going to slow down your heart rate. And that is the easiest way to tune into your body and to pay attention to your body, because when you're seeing yourself, a great example, when I'm in these tournaments, an admin will come around and say, who needs hand warmers, right? And it could be 75 degrees in the room, and they'll say, who needs hand warmers before the match? And there's always a few players, not on my teams, I have to say, but maybe that's the stigma, but I always see some players grab these hand warmers. Now, why are people's hands cold when it's 75 degrees? It's performance anxiety. Their blood is pooling to their chest, and your extremities are becoming colder. So even something like extenuating your exhale is going to signify to your body that you need to become more relaxed. But there's a whole bunch of symptoms that are psychophysiology symptoms that we're presenting all the time, and we have to be cued into what those are so we can address them.
Kind of a two-part question here, but as a coach and either as a player or a teammate, do you have any tips on how to identify that and then help people shift away from that in the moment?
Oh, sure. Well, so for starters, if you feel it and you notice it, that's one thing. But if you're not noticing it and you're allowing it to just autopilot you, that's something different. So first of all, we want to look at the body. If you're unable to practice stillness, if you're unable to have a sense of calmness, then you're experiencing it. We don't need to look further than that. If you're bouncing your legs all over the place, if you're biting your nails in between rounds, all the common gamer stuff, right? If we're doing those things, then it would be helpful to have something to calm your nerves, calm your psychophysiology down, exercise that parasympathetic that I mentioned. So whether it's a breathing technique or positive affirmations. I have one gamer that does a lot of positive affirmations in the mirror right before the match starts, so that's where he wants to be, is in the bathroom, washing his hands and kind of having that self-talk. Yeah. So whatever works for you, but certainly it shouldn't be something new. You know, you shouldn't be sitting at the PC in front of an arena and go, oh man, now the nerves are hitting me and I have nothing to fall back on. I didn't do my job if that's a first moment experience. So there should be something that is a practice, and you should be exercising that practice.
Got it. Appreciate that. So I want to switch gears a little bit. I had another question to check in on. I went back and watched our conversation from 2 years ago, and one of the things that you touched on in your presentation, your speech, was meeting people where they are. And I wanted to circle back and get a little bit more insight on what you meant by that.
Yeah, one of my staff members will laugh because she said I spoke too much about holistic health and what the term holistic means, but so meeting someone where they are. My first graduate degree was holistic health education, and the term holistic gets thrown around a lot. In the United States now it's gaining more traction, but for a long time it was viewed kind of as a pseudo term or something that didn't really include science for some reason. But the term holistic means to meet someone where they are. So if you and I were going to go to the gym together and you said, hey, I want to do a chest workout and this is how much weight I lift, that would be meeting you where you are instead of having you go to the gym and doing, you know, a cardio workout for a half marathon, let's say. So meeting someone where they are is my definition of the term holistic. So when I'm looking at a gamer, I'm looking at them 4 different ways. We're looking at gamers as humans, as individuals. We're looking at them as gamers, so that has without their teammates, let's say. We're looking at them as a team setting, and we're looking at them as dealing with the external community. So it's a 4-quadrant model. So when we talk about meeting someone where they are, if it's an individual, we're meeting them with health practices that support them personally. If we're talking about their strategies as a gamer, I'm working with their coach and staff to make sure that we're giving them the tools and the homework, let's say, so that they're doing things that are within their capacity as a gamer. As a teammate, I'm asking you to communicate and lead in the way that you can as a person. Not everyone's meant to be an in-game leader. Not everyone is meant to be a big communicator. Every team has people who are quiet. Every team who has people who are talkative, let's say, and communicative. So it's really finding out the best ways to drive that person forward and then supplying them with the path, let's say, and the tools for them to personally excel.
And then obviously that takes some years of training to master that, but
gosh, yeah, I mean, I'm still working on that. Yeah, I think that'll be, as a practitioner, that'll be a lifelong lesson. If you met me, 10 years ago, I was talking more about pH diets and anti-inflammatory, and now I'm talking more about intentionality. I mean, so there's an evolution as a practitioner, certainly, and what we're focused on, but I would say I'm trying to reply to what the needs are in professional esports as I experience them.
Appreciate that. Now, I want to touch on physical fitness. You already talked about it a little bit, and it's hard to approach this topic because from what I understand, everybody's a little different, so there's no one size fit all for either nutrition or for exercise.
For anything in health, yeah.
And I would also put mindset into this as well, because sometimes the biggest hurdle is the mental part of it. But from your experience with working with gamers, are there any good rules of thumb or good advice for the average gamer that maybe wants to take that step but doesn't really know where to go?
Sure. Well, I can't offer the exact practice, but I would say you have to have one. You have to do something. You have to move your body. There has to be some mobility. There has to be some strength. There has to be some cardiovascular. So whatever that looks like for you might be very individualized. But I would say you have to have some form of a program that makes sense for you to do all those areas: mobility, strength, cardiovascular system. So that'll look very different per person. I mean, one of my gamers, all I have him do is jump on a trampoline. That's literally the workout. But rebounding's fantastic for you. Circulates your blood flow, flushes the lymph system. It's a great detoxification. So for someone that doesn't want to go to the gym, doesn't want to lift weights, you can find something that's going to work for them. Right? So we meet each person where they are. There we are with the holistic idea again, right? But I would say even further than that, what we're doing now at Team Liquid, we do a great job of this. We're running psychophysiology testing. So we're taking DC potential. We're hooking guys up every morning. Beams. We're hooking them into a system on the heart rate strap. We have an application that we're using called the Omega Wave, and we're testing to see where their DC potential is. Effectively how much energy they have is DC potential. We're checking their heart rate, their resting. We're assessing how well they slept. And then through that data set, we're actually able to, right in real time, tell them what they should be doing for their warm-up. So instead of saying, well, it's Tuesday, I'm going to wake up and do cardio and strength training, you wake up, you plug yourself up to the electrodes, and you run your test, and your test says today's a good day for strength training, and you have this much energy. And the only caveat here is if a gamer runs their test and it says they're really low, I don't like them to see any of that, because I don't want them to think that they're really low energy on a match day. But we take their biometrics markers and we create their training program in real time based off of their biometrics. And that's something we would do for professional athletes. And I can promise you that's not what we were doing 7 years ago in esports. So we've seen a great advancement in the science. The technology is being applied to esports. You're seeing a lot of publications and a lot of institutions that are running good research on gamers and how to well prepare them.
It gives me a lot to think about.
Yeah, chew on that one.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not a standard training program. I mean, it's not as simple as we do Mondays back or chest and tri type days, which is what I even did when I was in youth for sports. I mean, we had very standard things. So now we're really personalizing them based on your biomarkers. So it's based on science. It's not something where it's just based on only interest, but it's based on science.
And this sort of dives into the mental aspect of it a little bit, but I want to, my goal is to hammer home the importance of being active, because we can't really give step-by-step advice, right? But I think being able to make emphasis on why it's important is what I want to convey here. And so I'm going to share a personal example to help illustrate that. Maybe if you have one as well from either yourself or from one of your players, you can talk about that as well. But for me, fitness has been a big part of esports for me. When I was about 25, I really got into working out. I was tired of being depressed, and so the only thing I really did was I worked at GameStop, I went to the gym, and I played League of Legends or Marvel vs. Capcom 3 at the time. And over time, a couple of things that I realized is, one, I was just getting more in shape, but it took a while to see the results, but I stopped thinking about the results. But over time, when I stopped doing, comparing where I am now to yesterday, I started to recognize the progress that I was making. I could lift more, etc. But also, I found myself being able to perform in games better. My mental stamina lasted longer. I had more mental clarity. And during the pandemic, a lot of that just went away. My mental clarity, my brain fog just has gotten terrible. So I'm sort of on this journey to kind of rediscover fitness and that mental clarity. And one of the things I've been doing is Taekwondo and pickleball. I do pickleball here. One of my coworkers actually organizes a league. And
I thought you had to be older for pickleball.
I mean, the older people are very scary.
Are you doing Taekwondo right here?
USA Taekwondo down the street.
Okay.
Yeah.
I took Taekwondo when I was at Western.
Oh, cool.
24 years ago, I took Taekwondo here.
Nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
I wonder if it's in the same area. Yeah.
Possibly. I'll have to ask about that. I invited them to tell them to come out here and check it out. But yeah, between doing pickleball and doing Taekwondo, and I still compete in fighting games. Like Tekken 8 is my game right now that I compete in, and I've not only at the game but also at my job, I've been able to have more clarity. My retention of memory, my ability to focus on things has gotten better, right? And I've talked before about this, the fact that I have ADHD. I've been diagnosed twice now, once as a kid, once as an adult. And so focus for me is really important, which is a section of this conversation. But yeah, I really wanted to like hammer down the fact that for me, it really impacted my ability to concentrate, to be able to play better. I'm not saying that all of a sudden I just knew how to play the game better. It's just my ability to focus and concentrate seemed better at the time. So I wanted to see if you have a similar experience from yourself or from one of your players.
Of course. Yeah, well, let's take a step back. So we could talk about the science of this all day. When you're working out, there's a chemical reaction that's taking place. So there's a reason why we feel better after we work out. And it almost doesn't matter the workout. It could be a workout without great form, without lifting a ton of weights. It could be 6% of the workout you wanted to do before you went there. If you do something physical, you are going to release hormones and chemicals that are going to make you feel better about yourself. But let's even talk about just the practice of this, because what you're doing is you're saying that I want to do something for myself, and you're giving yourself a small challenge, and then you're actually going and doing it. And so when we make small challenges to ourselves, and it's not a small challenge to do a workout program continually, that's a big challenge, but day by day. The challenge to actually tell yourself, I have an intention to do something, and then if our action backs it up, that's how we elevate our self-confidence. So I want you to think about that. Self-confidence is decreased when we know we want to do something and we witness ourselves not do it. But if there's something you want to see yourself do and you do it, even if you don't do it well, just by the action of trying to do it, you will elevate your self-confidence. And if we do this over a long enough period of time without the consideration or the concern over the outcomes, and we're not trying to measure that right away, then we change and we become this. And they say it takes roughly 22 days of a habit for it to become something that feels second nature. If you every morning drink a cup of lemon water to start your day in the first 20 minutes of your day, if you did that for 20 days, on the 20th day, your body is programmed to have the expectation of that occurring, and it will be ready for that to happen. It's the same thing with exercise or reading or anything that you do. We are a hardwired machine, and we are firing these neural pathways, and they are like the paths. I ran a 5K before this event today on campus because I just wanted to run around. And some of the paths you see on campus, they're the same as when I went here. It's like you could tell people walked here, even though the path isn't here, right? And once you run on that enough, now it's a path that you're going to take, and you just see the path. It's the same thing with anything that we're doing. If you do something enough, you're developing the pathway for your body to naturally do it. So willpower is something we don't need. We just need the ability to let ourselves go and do what we wanted to do. But that's where the confidence comes from. It's asking yourself to do something and then closing that gap between your intention and your action. And if there's a tight gap between there and you're doing the things that you're intending to do in your life, you're going to have a high level of confidence. And if you're not doing the things that you tell yourself you're going to want to do in life, you are not going to have self-confidence.
Yeah, that makes me think of, I like creating terms for some of the bad habits that I have, and this was years ago, and we talked about it a little bit, but I want to bring it back up. I created this term, maybe it exists out there, I'd have to look it up, but I call it the lazy perfectionist. There's this point at which, I used to be into art as well, so this really hit home for me when it comes to art, where there's this thought process of, I can't do the thing as good as I would like to do it. Mm-hmm. So rather than actually doing it or doing it to the best of my ability, I'm either going to not do it, or I'm going to, I'm trying to think of the nice way of saying it. I'm going to not do it as good as I could. I'm not going to put full effort into it, partly because I'm afraid of being disappointed.
Yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you don't disappoint yourself. This is a common practice. I mean, there's nothing more common than wasted potential. I remember my father saying that to me when I was younger. There's nothing more common than wasted potential. So to know that you have the potential for something, and we want to almost give ourselves the opportunity to fail. We want to give ourselves the cushion to not succeed. We want to comfort ourselves. And it's challenging to do hard things that we really want to accomplish. That's really tough, especially, you mentioned ADHD or ADD. focusing these days, there's a great book that I just have been telling gamers to read called Hyper Focus. And it's a really good one. The best part is I think if you read the first 60 pages, you probably got enough out of it. So it's not even, even if they don't get to the back cover, I still feel good about it. But it talks in so much detail about making sure that everything is intentional. And so if you said, well, I want to have this, improved body or something, well, that's way too big of a goal. That's way too big of an idea. It's a huge concept, and we have to really break that down. And how are we going to measure it from day to day? So making sure that we have really smart goals or whatever you want to kind of put them as, but something that's approachable, something that we can actually accomplish. And when people are starting meditation, they ask me, Edward, how long should I meditate? Should I do 15 minutes or 45 minutes? Or no, how about 3 breaths? Can you do 3 breaths a day? Can you do 3 breaths maybe twice a day? And if they can't do that, then they're not committed to the practice of it. So then we're just talking. So don't set yourself up for failure. If there's something you want to do, make it so obtainable that you have no reason not to do it, and make it a much smaller project.
Yeah, I can relate to that. And then I feel like there's another component of it too, of the fear of failure itself, right? Since we're on that topic, I do feel like on the opposite end, there are the goal is set either too high or they're not really willing to adjust it. And I'm trying to figure out how to articulate this, because I think the fear of failure is something that holds a lot of people back, and it's different for each person. But sometimes I feel like just the perception of the failure itself, regardless of how high or small the goal is, that fear in itself, rather than the expectation, is also what holds people back. And I'm curious to know if you have any insights on how to approach that, or just your thoughts on that topic.
I mean, the fear of failure sounds like such a silly topic in some ways to me sometimes, doesn't it? Like we're afraid to succeed, and it's like, well, what is there about you that you're worried about succeeding? And so much of that is about an identity. We don't view ourselves as that success, or we don't view ourselves as being able to do that. And I promise you, when I'm on a stage and see a championship moment occur, the players, what's the first thing they do? Why do they do that? It's because they're shocked. They can't believe it just happened. Yeah. So we can sit around and meditate all day. I've worked with Olympians. I've worked with a Boston Marathon winner. And I mean, you can do all the guided imagery. You can do all the, reaffirming statements in the mirror and all the health things. But, once you found out that you just won and it's all over, there's still this sense of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this just really happened. And we almost have an imposter syndrome element. So I'd like to tell the guys, you don't have to believe that you're a champion. What you have to do is look around the room and make sure that you're being honest about what you see. You're being paid to play this video game. You're one of the best in the world at it in my circle. This is what I'm telling them. And so we don't need to do something different. We need to do what we do every day and do it the best we can. If we do that, then the outcome is being a champion. So I don't think it's necessarily in convincing yourself that you're something. It's doing the action. So when I say lifestyle, if you want to be looking like a MMA fighter physique-wise, live the lifestyle, maybe it's a bad example in some ways, but live the lifestyle of the MMA fighter. And if you want to be a pro gamer that is winning championships in professional video gaming, your lifestyle needs to mimic what that pro gamer would be going through. And sometimes we see gamers that are interested in being a pro champion, but their lifestyles don't mimic that yet. And that's where they have this feeling of like, oh my gosh, I have to do something big. I have to do something unique or different, because they're not doing it every day. So they feel like it's something new or different. But if it's something that you've done every single day, then it's a matter of ignoring the noise and trusting in yourself and doing what we do every day.
Yeah, for me, I think working in sales really beat failure out of me. And also for the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to say that failure and losing are kind of in the same boat here. And I think the last component that I want to touch on in terms of like failure and the perception of it is how people perceive what failure is, right? It is almost like for some people it identifies them as a failure because they failed, rather than taking failure as a learning opportunity.
Right.
Like where I'm at in my life right now, when I fail, that means that there's something I need to learn and improve upon. That doesn't mean that I need to like hate myself or anything like that. Of course, everyone has those moments, but it seems like, especially when you're younger, it's really hard to reconcile either losing or failing. And so I wanted to like have you speak a little bit on that as well.
Well, I mean, our whole lives we're told you did good because you got this grade, you did bad because you got that test, right? And so our whole lives is a sequence of people like affirming success or criticizing our failures in that way. Because in video gaming is easy in that sense, because there's a scoreboard. So you know. I mean, you know if you won or not. And then even if your team wins, maybe your stats stunk. And so now we got this dilemma where it's like, oh man, our team won, but I stunk, and so now we've got this other problem to talk about. But yeah, I would say that is so outcome focused. And if you're in a team setting, like with one of my teams, and you're talking about what are we going to do today, you never hear them say, we're going to win. Well, yeah, that's the byproduct, but we're not focused on winning or losing, right? We're focused on the aspects of the process. So, I mean, it's cliche to say it's all about the process, but in that way it is. I mean, if you're outcome focused, and I learned this early in sales as well. I worked for Dan Gilbert right out of Western Michigan, and he always said, money follows, it never leads, and all these different things. Like he had all these isms, but they end up being true in everything in life too. That if we're true to ourselves and we're taking care of the people around us, and this is a relationship game. I mean, I'm talking about team games mostly, right? And so we're talking about your outcome is going to be dependent on your relationship with the person next to you. And in these moments where you have to communicate like that, and you're playing a team that they love each other, and you're playing these Polish kids that just love playing for each other, and they're just going to kill for each other, and you're on the stage playing them, you better be quick, and you better be feeling good about the guy next to you so that you can support and die on the server for him and exchange that quickly. But so much of this is what you're talking about. We're talking about identity. We're talking about comparisons. We're talking about expectations. These are all things that all humans have to deal with in their life, whether it's things that are handed down from parents or peers or their own self-identifiers. Yeah, they're all important areas to explore.
Yeah, and I think it also ties back nicely to what you were saying before about building the habit. Because I think sometimes the fears and concerns that people have end up going away when you form a habit that doesn't keep reaffirming the fear that you have.
Well, how about once you start doing something?
Right, yeah.
Once you start working on it, if anybody in here, for those of you that are students, when you have a paper that's due and it's coming up and you just wait and wait and wait and wait on that project and wait, and then all of a sudden you got to do something about it. The anxiety is the waiting. Once you start working on it, you might still be kind of nervous that you're not going to meet the deadline, but once you start working on something, the anxiety falls away. So it's the matter of rumination that creates anxiety, and anxiety is just simply an unknown in the future. It's an unknown outcome of the future. That's all anxiety is. So if you're living in the present moment, and you're therefore working on it, but if you're living in the present moment enough, you're not thinking about that future outcome anyway. So I would say once somebody starts working on something, you see someone that's obese and they're sick of it, once they start working on it, they're already starting to feel better about it. They don't have to lose every pound and hit their goal. Once they start working towards their goal, and it's working towards the goal that feels good. It's why when you start college and you're going to these classes and you say, well, I'm just going to keep going and going and going, and you feel like you're getting somewhere, even though if you step back, you go, oh my gosh, it's like 1,000 times I have to do this. It's like a crazy amount of times you got to do it before they give you that little piece of paper and charge you all the money and get you out of there, So it's just a matter of the repetition and doing it day after day. And I think once you start stepping away from the outcome or needing it to be something special, you just do the work. The anxiety disappears. Talking about it's a problem too. I have some guys that we get into a session and I say, are we just yapping? Is all we're doing is yapping? Like, what can we do? Aristotle said, and I meant to include this in part of the keynote, but this is just information. Everything that I've learned about mental health or physical health or nutrition health and performance is just information. Just like there's so many books in this library that I've never read, and I graduated from here, but those are just information. Now, if I take that book and I read it and I do something with it and I instill action within my life, then it becomes knowledge. And so for me, it's the difference between having an idea of something and doing it. So we'll oftentimes say, let's just be about that action. Let's do something. Let's be about action. And if it's too theoretical, especially in mental health, if you're too busy focused on your problems, you will identify as your problems. And that's a problem. It's a problem within itself. So there's a time to explore your mental health issues. There's a time to say, let me set those on the sideline and do something about it right now. And over rumination, continually thinking about the same thing over and over again, really doesn't help us. And overthinking, which I consider most of thinking to be overthinking, requires action to step away from it. That's why Einstein said, take a nap and then the theory will come. That's why we go exercise or do something instead of sitting on the server for hour and hour on end. You've got to get up and move. And that includes the body to help the mind. It's the same unit.
Yeah. Well, on that note, let's shift to mental. You know,
Sure.
that's the part that I'm always excited about. And I feel like the first topic that I always have to at least address is the growth mindset itself, because I feel like a lot of the other things that we talk about or have talked about, if you're not bought into it, it doesn't really matter.
Sure.
Right. So I wanted to see if you could define it in your words, what the growth mindset is and why that's important in terms of what we're talking about.
Sure. I'll try not to be too textbook, but I would say the growth mindset is having an idea of where you want to go and being willing to do something to get there. How about that?
Short and sweet.
Having an idea of where you want to go and having a plan that you follow to get there. I would say that's a growth mindset. Doesn't need to be perfect, but you just have to have something that you're striving towards and that you're committed to do. We can always improve the plan, but you have to have an intention and a plan and the action behind it. I would say that defines the characteristics of a growth mindset for me.
Okay. And then in terms of what we're talking about, a lot of people don't inherently have that kind of mindset.
Sure.
There's limiting beliefs, right, or a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
It's hard to really articulate this, but I wanted to see if you have some general tips or thought processes on how people can kind of shift towards that. Like maybe they want to be more, people use the term positive, which is very generic sometimes, but someone who wants to have a mindset where they want to get from A to B. What have you experienced in players that maybe don't have that naturally adapted?
My first question is, do they know what they want?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what you want, how are you going to drive towards it? So, and that can be tough. I mean, I remember my first years here, I changed my program a couple times. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. Do I want to be a teacher? Do I want to go into business? Do I want kinesiology? And that took me an extra 6 or 7 years after undergrad to figure out, this is exactly what I want to do. And I went to grad school and PhD for that. So not knowing what you want to do creates the ambiguity. If you have ambiguity, how are we going to drive somewhere if we don't know what the destination is? So then you're just driving all over the place, which reminds me of one of my favorite Yogi Berra-isms that I have to say here is, I don't know where we're going, but we're making great time. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know the path to get there? So I think it's important that we have a strong intention of where we want to head, and that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean something professionally or personally or financially or physically. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to kind of determine what a goal is, but I would say for a growth mindset, there has to be something that we're shooting towards and a structured plan to be able to get there.
When you say getting somewhere, I think a lot of people think winning. And I wanted to get a little bit more clarification on that.
Yeah, that's a good injection there. Yeah, I'm not thinking of it as winning at all. I think if you're trying to go, well, I mean, you could say, well, I want to win. Fine. Okay, so you want to, win the NBA championship. Okay. So what are the stages to get you there? I mean, first off, are you delusional? Are you a pro basketball player, right? So if you're saying you want to win the Counter-Strike major in Shanghai, you better be in the tournament, right? So figure out the path to get yourself to where you're able to compete in what you want to compete in. So for me, it doesn't have anything to do with winning or losing. I mean, the outcome really is kind of just a surprise at the end. I mean, that should come down to some shots. We're very rarely are we talking about winning or losing. We're talking about all of the characteristics and the practices that go into the equation that we think will give us the best outcome. So I would say, again, it doesn't matter. We need to make it much shorter. We need to make it like on a daily practice. If you wake up, let me rephrase it. If you wake up and you don't know what your intentions are for the day, start there. What are the intentions of today? What are the 3 things that you want to experience today? And if you wake up and don't know that, maybe that's the invitation tonight. Make sure that you spend your first few minutes in the day understanding, what are my 3 things that I'm going to accomplish today? And I'd even say if we're talking about life structure, make sure you get those done in the first 8 hours that you wake up. Make them a priority and get them done. But you have to have something. It doesn't matter what subject matter we're talking about. Mindfulness, physique, diet, it just doesn't matter. You have to have an intention behind it if you're going to have a plan and an action for it. So you got to start there. Do you know what you want? And to your inquiry, some gamers don't know. I have some pro gamers that I work with or have worked with, and they don't have a concept of where this thing ends or what they're doing here. They just like playing video games, and they were so darn good at it that they ended up getting paid money to do it professionally. Good for them. That's great. But now if we have a new goal that comes up, like not wanting to disappoint our teammates or keeping our careers or maybe experiencing success while we're here, then we have to instill that path to get there.
Yeah. If we have time, I want to circle back to the team aspect a little bit more, but I wanted to dig into something I've been thinking about recently that ties into a lot of what we talked about, but isn't always mentioned, and I wanted to get your take on it. And for me, I think the term humility is important to have in your arsenal, so to speak, as a competitor. It's different for each person, but I think for some people, the fear of failure or dealing with losing, people who spike their controllers when they're mad. I think there are some people who have a sense of entitlement to winning or an entitlement to a certain outcome. And I feel like a good counter to that is the sense of humility, acknowledging that your teammates or your opponent is good. A lot of people, when they lose, they don't want to acknowledge that their teammate is or their opponents are good. They want to say, "Oh, he used a cheap gun," or "Oh, he's using a cheap character." Or, "This
These
tactic
guys
is
are
bad."
dogs. They're not supposed to beat us like that.
Right.
These guys didn't play the game the way they're supposed to. I hear that one.
Right.
So if you're a top 10 team and you play a team that's ranked 30th, let's say, or maybe a university team, no offense to the universities, but we just grab scrimmages, and you're in a scrimmage against a team and you go, "Oh my gosh, these guys are playing it the way they're not supposed to," right? They're not supposed to shoot from there. They're not supposed to play it this style. There's some truth to that at times. Like, are we getting out of practice what we're going to have to go do against the top tier teams, right? So that's something. But this idea of entitlement and gratitude, we work on this too. I've worked with some really wealthy young gamers in Los Angeles. And there is a sense of entitlement. Whether I win or lose, there's catering. Whether I win or lose, I have this nice apartment in Santa Monica, right? And they have this sense of, like, if I want something, the organization should have to buy it. I remember being in a sporting goods store one time, and a young man who makes millions of dollars said to me, "Edward, can you buy this exercise ball for me?" And it was like $22. And I'm like, no, buy it yourself, right? So there is a sense of this. But we do a lot to instill some gratitude with them. First off, respecting your opponent, that's just the art of war. If you don't understand to respect your opponent, you don't understand competitive spirit. Like, not respecting your opponent there's a book called Tribal Leadership that does a good job of explaining this. But effectively, you're not going to peak perform with your teammates if you're too busy focused on your opponent or trashing your opponent. That is what I consider to be like 80th percentile of a performance strategy, would be someone who they're conquering their opponent. Even in martial arts, I would say you don't want to focus on your opponent's weaknesses as much as the things you're going to do. Because once your opponent starts doing something you didn't expect, now you're on your heels. So same thing in video gaming. You have to work your plan. But I would say having gratitude and a sense of feeling fortunate for what we're getting to do. And so in Los Angeles, we feed the homeless. That's something we do. We take those expensive sushi leftovers and we go out and we feed the homeless with them. We do coat drives and other things, but ways to expose them to some humility, because some of these kids, I mean, there's some kids in professional video gaming who are under the age of 20 who are making insane money, and all of their life is paid for, essentially. And so this is going to be their new lifestyle, right? And so what kind of human are we developing if we don't offer them a sense of experience and exposure to something that will make them more humble, more human-like, let's say.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Can I add on that too?
Yeah.
We're going to China, and something we have to think about. So the hotel we'll be at in Shanghai, my guys are flying there. I'm working with Team Liquid's Counter-Strike team, for those of you that don't know where I'm working. And my Counter-Strike team is in Shanghai, and right now they're flying to China, like in 6 hours or something. They fly to China, and they'll be there for the next few weeks. And I'll go join them here pretty soon. But in their hotel, the event coordinators rented out the entire hotel. Because in the past, fans would get rooms in the hotel, and they would camp out in the elevators in China and leave one spot on the elevators for a player to get on. And that was it. So players were having a tough time getting to floors. I had a player, Twist, who I work with. Russ is very famous internationally. For those of you that follow Counter-Strike, Twist is a big deal, top 20 guy. He's our IGL. He had something like 100 cakes baked for him last time he was in China and brought to his room. So the whole hallway is full of birthday cakes on his birthday. So, I mean, these are guys that they can't go outside. They can't go in the malls. They can't go in the gym. He sent me photos of him in the gym the last time he was in China. And it's literally, he's at like a leg machine, right? And it's literally just kids standing around him in a circle taking photos of him. So, I mean, the lifestyle it's like celebrity status lifestyle, right? So we have to, I mean, you talk about humility and gratitude, like that could be very frustrating for someone. Right? Or they can say, I'm really grateful for this, and these are stories I'm going to tell my grandkids someday. and they can greet their fans with like love and appreciation rather than, being annoyed. I grew up around baseball players. My father was good friends with some Detroit Tigers, and I've met people that say, "Oh, this guy was a real jerk," and I'm like, "Are you kidding me? That guy was so nice to me," right? And so these stories are things that they carry on for the rest of their lives, and I think it's really important the way that we interact with the community and the fan base. And we really are, you yourself are pioneering this Western program. I'm pioneering performance in professional video gaming. I mean, these aren't things that we went to school for before. We're leading this category right now. And so those of you in here, I mean, in 20 years from now, when there's some event going on like this, I can only imagine it's going to be in a much bigger arena and, just continue to grow and grow and grow as this generation kind of gets to that point. But I think it's important that, we're raising... I like to tell the owners that interview me, they say, "Edward, what are you going to do for my organization?" The first thing I tell them is, "I'm going to help you make really good men." That's where we start. And so if we can start doing that instead of just focusing on the video gaming aspect, I think it makes much better video gamers.
Well said. And one thing I'll clarify on too is that I know we're not robots, right? So there are emotions that are going to come out. So I don't want to come off as like, just because you're getting mad because you lost doesn't mean you're emotionally invested. So I want to make sure I make that clarification.
Well,
that
and
it is
let me
okay.
go on the record by saying the guy that smashed the desk at that last tournament you're referencing, Nico, is one of my former clients who I absolutely love, Nicola. And I don't necessarily think it was a bad thing that he smashed his desk, even though he was dripping some blood out of his finger there, and ended up winning the tournament. So I mean, I feel a little conflicted. There was a player for Complexity that had a moment, Halzerk, I believe, and he had a moment like that a few tournaments ago, and I bumped into him in an elevator, and I said, "I liked your passion." He goes, "You have no idea how much heat I caught for that, for smashing a desk." We have a player on my team right now who wants to be Djokovic. His name's Ultimate, and we joke that he's trying to become the Djokovic of video gaming. Djokovic is a top-tier tennis player. And he said, "But Djokovic smashes some rackets. Can I smash my mouse sometimes?" I said, "Yeah, we got to have an outlet." So we bought him some cheapo Dell mouse, no offense, Dell, but just kind of went to Best Buy and bought him some cheapo mouse, and that's his smash mouse, right? Not the game, for the record, but yeah, the mouse that he gets to smash. So I mean, we do need outlets for this. If you don't, whether we're talking about masculinity or whatever the subject matter is, if you have some frustration within you and you don't have the right vehicle to let it out, you're not peak performing. Mm-hmm. There has to be an outlet for that. So maybe smashing the desk isn't advisable, so I don't want people to do that. But don't do it here. But there has to be that outlet. And notice that it's a physical thing. We're sitting in a chair playing these games, and they're frustrating. And we're housing all of these emotions within our bodies. Mm-hmm. And the body will give you that sign. I mean, if you don't treat your body right over a long enough period of time, it shows you disease, right? And that's something that is accumulative. So same thing for the gamers. They have to have a practice to pass themselves and make sure they're allowing that energy out.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I've talked to my players in my Rocket League team. I've mentioned before that for me personally, I compete at my best when I have some sense of anger, because I'm traditionally a pretty laid-back person. I'm very easygoing, but in order for me, like the same thing with martial arts, there's like a flip, a switch that gets flipped where I have to think about my opponent. Like almost in a combatant kind of way, right? And that allows me to lock in and focus. And so I try to make sure that, like, as I learn more about being a coach and as a competitor, that I'm not conveying this, like, people think that you're saying don't feel emotions or don't think anything.
You can't do this. It's like meditating and trying not to think.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't do this. There's thoughts that are going to come in. You're going to experience emotions. You're going to have feelings. Mm-hmm. So the emotions are really just processing your feelings. The feelings are happening. The feelings are taking place. And the emotions are your processing of those, your interpretation of those. So, and I'll take a step back. I like that you have this idea of flipping a switch. As a practitioner and someone who practices Taoism, which is the yin-yang, anytime that I've had a client that comes in, and this isn't really esports relative, but this is relevant to any person that I'm meeting with, I believe that there's two types of people. There's somebody that needs to get up and move more, and there's someone that needs to sit down and calm themselves down more, right? And we all have both of those variables within us, and at different times we have to exercise those variables. So for some of my introverts, let's say, who are very laid back, when it's time to come to the match time, I need them heightened. But some of my players who are complete balls of fire, and they're ready to explode before the match even starts, I need them contained and calming themselves down. So it's recognizing, back to the holistic concept, right? But it's recognizing the individual and which version they are and how we're moving them into performance optimization. So everybody's kind of like that. And you mentioned something really kind of fun that was, it's almost like you're making a game within yourself and you're figuring out this game. I do that as a runner, and I'm no pro runner. I'm not running in competitions or races or anything. But even while I'm out there, I'm creating all these narratives and games with myself. That's what life is. Life is a game. I mean, if you want to learn more about that, study Alan Watts. Alan Watts was really good at teaching that this is just a game that you're playing. And once you realize that it's a game that you're playing, it's a lot of fun. And it can become even folding laundry can be fun. Thich Nhat Hanh does a good job of teaching that. But everything can become fun once you realize that this is just a song and a dance, and you're just moving through it in that way. So you don't need to get hung up on it. But in that way, you're creating a game for yourself. And that's something that we encourage the players to do too. Create a story, create a game, you know? And that allows some of the guys too, because they're such good friends with their opponents. You know, you ask some of the guys that go, well, I really don't care because Floppy won, and I wanted Floppy to win the game. And it's like, aren't you hungry to win? You know, so you have to kind of separate that a little bit and create a different mindset or environment or persona or whatever you want to do to have something that you can lean into.
Yeah, well said. So we're actually making pretty good time. Like, I feel like I could talk about more stuff. I think if there's time within the Q&A, we can do more of that. But I wanted to see if you had any other closing statements before we take a short break and get to the Q&A.
No, I'm kind of tuned into what we're talking about. So no, not that I was just thinking of your questions. No, looking forward to seeing if there's any good questions on Twitch or from the audience, and we can continue the conversation.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll cut to a short break, guys. You know, stretch your legs, go to the restroom, get some drinks if you need to.
Practice what we preach.
Yeah.
Get up and move around. We
Yeah.
do like to tell the guys, you know, every 40 to 50 minutes, you need to be out of that chair. And that's important. And that includes your eyesight too. If you're staring at that screen for 40 to 50 minutes, you're not going to be as focused and locked in. Your eyes have to readjust. So we need to do things to move the body. And I'm big on this air squat thing, the body squat thing now. So every hour that I'm in a session, and I'm not going to have time to go for a 30-minute walk, but I'll have time to do like 10 air squats. Everybody knows what air squats are, yeah? Or I'll have Tavian show you some. So just doing squats, you know, just body squats. But the science on that right now is fantastic, and it says it is effectively similar to a 30-minute walk outside in terms of brain chemistry and resetting your psychophysiology. So, yeah, it's important that we move around. So with that said, let's all take a short break, I guess, and get up and move around a bit, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. All right, cool. Thank you for the conversation, by the way. I love those kinds of conversations. I have a couple of ideas if we have any extra time. We have Q&A time. We have questions that were submitted ahead of time. We also have some questions from the Twitch chat. We want to give you guys, the people that came in person, the opportunity to ask questions first. So we have a microphone down here, and you guys can come on down. So don't be shy. If you submitted your questions online, then I probably have those, and I'll ask that as well. But I wanted to give you guys the first chance to ask any questions. So are there any takers? No? All right. Well, if you got, oh, cool. Good to see you.
Test, 1, 2. All right. Hey, how you guys doing? Great. It's great to see you. My name is Maxwell, and I worked esports a little bit. I worked with Tavian with Albion, and I've worked with certain esports in Maryland. So that's part of my background, but also I work in IT, and my work hired me partially for emotional coaching due to my background. So getting to be here, learning a lot from you, because I think there is a massive mix between the two. Despite, you take video games out of the equation, there's still a massive thing that you're still learning, for people. So my question for you today, because I was hearing you guys talk about making decisions and giving yourself goals every day, and that kind of made me think about choice paralysis. And that is something that people deal with every day, including myself, and that can come from just giving yourself something to do for your physical activities, or even looking at your game library and trying to figure out what to play for the day, right? So my question for you is, how can you, one, see choice paralysis while it's happening, and how can you overcome it and do something about that?
Good question. And what's your name again? I'm sorry?
Maxwell.
Maxwell. So nice to meet you. Thank you for your
Nice
question.
to meet you too.
So I would say first off, we want to slow down and check in and find out what are we actually looking to do. So for instance, where you say, well, like I'm almost imagining my children trying to play some Switch game or something and fighting over what game, or, should we play hockey or soccer or baseball outside today? How fortunate we are to have choices, first and foremost, right? So to maybe approach it with a sense of gratitude first, to think to yourself, well, I'm so fortunate that I've got all these opportunities in front of me. And then take some time and listen to yourself to see what you're feeling like doing. So whether it's, I know I'm going to go to the gym, but I don't really know what I'm going to do, and listening to yourself and seeing what you want to do. But I wouldn't rush into coming up with a strategy before I've already investigated and spent some time to wonder and explore what I'm feeling. So I would say almost no matter what it is, that'll help clear up what the choices should be. Because if we're just looking at the choices themselves, there will be paralysis. And that's kind of like looking at an outcome. But if we're considering our feeling and what we're trying to accomplish from it, I think that would offer clarity up front. And so hopefully that's a way to bring to the surface what you actually want to do. Mm-hmm. And then you can sit down and come up with a plan and a strategy about what you're going to do with it. But you have to know what you're going to aim at before you can come up with that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I really
sure,
appreciate
sure.
All right, any other, I see someone getting up. All right, League of Legends player.
Oh, no. Poor guy, League of Legends guy. Uh-oh. I say that with love to League of Legends, for the record.
My name is Jay. I had a more general question. So a lot of the players here are on the more average skill side, not exactly at that top level of competition. What would you say they, and maybe even their coaches, should be focusing on applying for their improvement, not necessarily for someone who's putting in 8 hours a day on these games, but for someone who is a lot more on the, I get onto Overwatch for a couple hours at night because I enjoy playing it with my friends?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So the reason we get into video gaming is for fun. That's the reason we get into it. So whether we're talking about professional level or amateur level, let's call it, we're doing it for fun. So I would say, first and foremost, cultivate an experience of fun. If you're going to play for a couple hours for fun, you better have fun. Don't get off the server and look back at with regret or feel like you wasted your time. I would say in the same way that, you know, I'm an amateur runner, let's say, but I still stretch, I still warm up, I still foam roll, I still take electrolytes, I still eat, I still do a lot of the things that professional runners are doing. I'm just not as good at running, right? So I would say similarly, a lot of these things still exist. If you're, you know, a 12-year-old and you're going to sit down and play Smash for a few hours, did you get something to drink? Did you go outside yet? Did you do your room yet? Did you make your bed? Right? There's still like a sequence of responsibilities that I think are involved with it. So I would say almost independent of, you know, what the level of expertise is or how talented you are. And I advocate that even in my own life, and I'll give you kind of a strange analogy perhaps, but let's say I'm going to a baseball game with my business partner, Dan. I will ask Dan before the game, what are we trying to get out of tonight? Are we going to the casino after the game? We're going straight home? Are you drinking these days? Are you not drinking? Are we running before the game? You know, is this a game where we're watching every pitch, or are we going to go hang out and, you know, kind of just have a chat? So it's about establishing what you want to get out of that period of time. I don't care how good you are at anything. You need to know what you want to get out of that hour. So I would say putting in some thought, even if you're just an amateur gamer and you say, well, I just want to make sure I have fun. Well, good, then do the things that you make sure you have fun. And I've heard my kids end a video game session where they don't sound like they're having fun together. You know, and I've heard other guys that are just playing for fun at the collegiate or professional level. I'm just going to play for fun for a couple hours. And you talk to them afterwards and they're just furious, right? So let's make sure our intentions are aligned with what our experiences are. So if you're trying to have fun, set it up for having fun.
Nice. Any other questions? And I kind of wanted to follow up on part of that. It wasn't like the core part of the question. And I kind of have a funny story later on too, but I think also the goals that people might have, you kind of touched on this, but you know, is it for fun or is it something where like you're on a team? So I'm assuming that this person wants to get better. So are you just hopping into ranked and just, you know, grinding it out, or are you very intentional about it?
Exactly, yeah. What are we spending our time on? If you're, again, as a runner, I mean, if I'm just going out there and running haphazardly and never thinking about it, I'm not working towards anything, right? You're just having an experiential. So, yeah, if you're on a team for something and you're trying to get better, there should be a path. You know, there should be something that you're working towards. Yeah. Hello. Might have a dead mic here. We can hear you, James. You just keep talking.
So you mentioned earlier about like team captains talking to the players when you're going through like the initial process, like the mind of the day, getting ready for a big competition. Are there specific skills that you work with team captains to help them influence the players positively during the match, different than like a regular player, or are you basically doing the same types of things?
It's a good question. No, I'd say there's overlap, but I would say my team captains generally are the outspoken guy on the team or the leader, let's just say. And we are working on unique skill set for them. Yeah, so those are developmental skills that are different than, say, a player who doesn't, you know, have any leadership desires or ability on that team. So they are, yeah. And so our session might involve, you know, motivating your teammates differently, communicating. I like that you brought in the term positivity. It's incredible. Some of these teams I'll go to work with. Our coach right now, Mither, is so fantastic about being positive. But there are many coaches that I've worked with where everything is a criticism. Everything's something that we're not doing well. There's no celebrating even the good things. And you have to celebrate the successes. You have to celebrate at least 50% of the feedback. I want to be positive. But to be direct with your question, no, it's different. We're working on different things with different people. My captains are developing those leadership skill sets differently than someone who doesn't show an interest or an ability to be a leader on the team. And so we're working on that. And I do really appreciate that you brought in the term positivity to that, because even at the professional level, that's something we have to talk about often. Are we just trying not to lose? Are we really celebrating good things that happen? And those start to snowball. You start celebrating the good things that are happening, and they start happening more frequently. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Nice. Oh, I see another person come up for a question. Oh, thank you, thank you. We'll get that cut back on or fresh batteries, whichever one is the case. You might have to check the power first just to see if it turns on. I think he's just getting fresh batteries just for the heck of it anyway. Yeah, in the meantime, I got some questions that I'll ask, and then we'll get right to that one as well. Ooh, yeah, so I put this one at the top because I thought this was a really good one. From your experience, can you talk a little bit about burnout and like in the work environment? Obviously, for you, it'd be esports, and then like, how do you see it? Like, as someone else, how do you see it in yourself or in others? And then also, like, how do you help that from like your colleagues crashing? Nope.
Yeah, burnout's a really important topic, and it isn't something that just creeps up on you and happens. Sometimes people think, oh, this has been a tough week, I'm experiencing burnout. Burnout's a long-term thing, and that's a term that we use in a professional way. It's not something we just throw around. So there is a condition that's having to be met to be burned out. But let's just talk about what it's like to sustain work and a high level of work process over a long period of time. This is going to completely depend on your lifestyle. You know, what is your sleep cycle like? What are your expectations like? There's some guys, I think of like JKS, for those of you that are Counter-Strike guys, this guy's been living out of a suitcase for like 6 years. And there is no such thing as home. He lives with a girlfriend in Denmark, and they have an apartment there, but even that doesn't, you know, he's from Australia. So this idea of having a routine, burnout will happen if you feel like you're away from home. Burnout will feel like if you're not doing something that you're supposed to be doing, you're doing something outside of your normal, you are going to drain your reserve batteries quickly. So circadian rhythm, I know that's a term that we love to throw around performance, making sure that we're doing what's necessary for our circadian rhythms. For those of you that don't know what that is, research it, but it's our internal time clock. So making sure that we're around when the sun's coming up at some point and seeing that morning light and seeing the sunset at some point and having a sleep cycle. And I mean, everything's kind of involved. But I will say that burnout, just generally speaking, is a variable of professional gaming. If you're in professional gaming, you have to have a plan against burnout because the system is devised for you to burn out. If you're traveling for hundreds of days a year out of a hotel and having to work at odd hours and around the clock and never having a day off, you're going to burn out. So the environment is designed for burnout. And that's why you're seeing some players, we've had suicides, we've had players retire at an early age because of burnout. And I think we have to be very cognizant of the practices that we have day in and day out, the health and wellness practices. That's really the only way to stave off burnout, is to make sure that what you're doing in, day out is a sustainable practice. And that's a complex subject, of course, but if you're feeling like you're headed towards burnout, you really need to analyze how you're spending your time and reassess and reprogram.
All right, Miles, I see you got a question there. Yeah.
All right. My name is Miles. I've been in the esports program at Western for a while. My first year, I was on the Club Valorant team, then I was on varsity, and now I'm a coach. And I found that I really enjoy coaching. And I'm like, okay, maybe I want to go farther than this. So I'm looking at teams. And then I literally have a Google Doc where I have teams that I could I found where I can message them or email them. But I've been finding myself scared to actually go out and message them. And the first time I did it, I'm like, okay, I'll just make a strat book just so I have something to say if they have questions. And then I never ended up even making this strat book. Next time, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then I end up not doing that. How can I get past that sort of fear of just messaging teams?
Good question. So we are working in an entrepreneurial industry. This isn't like you're going to go on LinkedIn and find a head Valorant coaching job at the professional level, right? Maybe you'll see a tweet of an org that's looking for a new coach, but that's probably going to be someone that they know. So this idea of the fear of even reaching out to them, I would say, if you feel like you're enjoying it, you're going to have to create your own opportunity of it. No one's going to come to you and knock on the door and just say, hey, I'd like to just give you this dream opportunity, right? You're going to have to go knock on the door and do it. And in esports, you see that even some of the gamers say, hey, I want to try out with that team. I want to do this. And even they are being proactive in that. So I would say, it sounds like you believe in yourself. You're just not sure about your ability to go to these teams. And all of us feel like that in some ways. This is a new industry. You know, point to me the Valorant coach that's been doing this for 10 years.
Right.
I mean, the game started, what, like 5 years ago? I mean, so no one's got the, how many years?
4.
4? That's a long 4 years of my life. But yeah, it's only 4 years old, so this isn't even established yet. Teams don't even know what they're looking for yet. So if you think, and this is what I tell young performance practitioners that are trying to get in the scene as well, if you think you're good at what you do and you really want to do this, you have to find a way to help people with it. And if you think you understand Valorant as a coach, you need to reach out to these orgs and tell them, no, it's not going to be a perfect way to do it because you're creating this. So let's not be afraid about it being perfect. Let's just ask ourselves if we're going to do it. And after you reach out to 10 of them, you'll go, okay, this is working or this isn't working, and I'm going to change up my plan. You know, but kind of like you were mentioning sales experience early, you got to go knock on these doors. And you're going to get some rejection. I get rejection. I reach out to orgs. I reached out to an org not too long ago. I almost just said who it was. I don't want to do that. But I reached out to an org pretty recently and said, hey, you know, I hear you could use some help, and you have a player who's reaching out to me, and I'd really like to help the org. And they said, no, get out of here. You know, I said, do you know who I am? Do you know what I did? They said, yeah, we'll see you around the block. I said, okay. You know, and they already had a guy, and they're happy with their guy, and I'm not here to, you know, necessarily try to take someone else's job, but this is a tough industry. There are thousands of young people who want my job. I know that. The orgs tell me, no, we get hundreds of emails a year for your job, you know, and I can't sit around and, oh my gosh, they're knocking down my door. I can't worry about that. I just got to go out there and do the great work. So if you feel like you've found something that you're good at, I'm going to need you to find the vehicle to present it to them. And a wise man once told me that a project well presented is half sold. So if you think you have something that's worthy of presenting to them, go knock on the door. You know, and if you have some questions as a follow-up to me, go ahead and ask. Shoot me a DM or something. I'll put you in touch with a professional Valorant coach, and you can ask him, hey, how'd you do this? I think I'm good enough to be a pro coach, and maybe they can mentor you a little bit with that too.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
Thank you.
Kind of want to add on to something you were saying earlier and circle back. You were on the same wavelength as me with the sales thing. One, there's a term, I've heard it all over the place. I've heard it in anime, but you don't get a home run if you don't swing the bat. And I know it's easier said than done, but like I had a crippling fear of just social interaction until I got my first job at GameStop. And then I had to start like selling stuff because I was always like a cook at McDonald's or something like that. And after a while, I realized that I was afraid of like rejection. It could be different for you, but more than likely there's some sort of fear that's holding you from doing that. But realistically, you know, I had to ask myself, what's the worst that could happen? And after I realized that the worst that can happen is to just say no, then I started getting a lot easier to be able to ask those questions.
Yeah. With one mic, this is tricky. I don't want to cut you off preemptively. We have to do this, and my question might be, how many times do you think you have to get rejected before you get what you want? Right? And if you said, well, I probably got to get rejected. I remember one night when I was a young balding man here in one of the bars, and I thought to myself, how many girls do I have to try to dance with before I can get one to dance with me? And we made a joke out of it, like how many times can I get rejected? And they teach that in sales, right? That's sales education. Like if you look at it like I have to talk to 100 people before I'll get the sale, or whatever numbers apply. You think, okay, well, in your case, how many orgs am I going to have to talk to? Is it going to be the first one? If I call Edward and Liquid, or, you know, are they hiring? Well, no, they already have a coach. Okay, well, now I'm going to stop doing it. No, you know, you're going to have to do a lot of it. So you tell yourself, every time I get a rejection, this is great news. It's great news. I'm getting closer to success, right? And so welcome the rejection. And if you think in your head, man, I'm probably going to have to talk to 20, let's just say, before I get somewhere, then when you get that rejection, great news. You're 19 closer. You know, and if I told you it only took you 20 times to get rejected, you might go try to find 20 people to reject right now or get rejected by right now, right? And so let's not look at it like I have to succeed. Let's look at it like how much failure will I have to go through before I'm ready to succeed?
One last thing to add on to that. So this job is actually a good example of like rejection in a way. Back in like 2016, 2017, when I heard about the program starting up, I took it upon myself to reach out to the person, Scott Puckett, who was creating the program. And I had a chance to meet with him and sit down with him and show him everything I was doing. And it was basically thanks for stopping by, but we don't really need what you have right now. 2 years roll by, and then, I'm doing more. I'm still working on my craft. I'm organizing tournaments. Max remembers the days of Glitch Gaming Lounge where I was organizing my fighting tournaments at my first venue. I was teaching people how to get into fighting games, and I taught the person who was his assistant how to play Street Fighter. And they come back 2 years later, or like a couple months later after I taught him how to play Street Fighter, didn't know who he was, and he said, "You should apply for this position." So not only did I, technically get rejected, but I kept honing my craft in the meantime. And when the time came for them to actually look for something that I had, I was more prepared than when they met me the first time. So that's something that I would consider is, on one half, keep honing your craft, and then on the other half, just because a rejection is a rejection right now doesn't mean it's always going to be a rejection.
Beautifully put, yeah. I've had this experience in esports where I met somebody in an organization that was, let's say, on the bottom of the totem pole at the organization, but really nice young guy. And I treated him really well and never thought to myself, this guy will come back and be of value to me, professionally at least. And this young guy goes to a new org. The new org owner really likes him. He's doing the same middle management job at that new org, but tells the owner he should call me. Owner calls me, I get a new job, right? So, my guru Ram Dass used to say, treat everyone as if it's you're meeting God in drag, which is a really complex concept, but it's a little bit of that concept of let's treat everyone with love and respect in this industry. You don't know who you're talking to at these orgs. You don't know who's going to talk to who, and if you walk in there and tell them what you want to do and ask them if they have some room for you to help them, I've seen some really talented people find jobs from that, and likewise, it comes back around. How you treat people will always come back around. So just be mindful of that as you get rejected.
Yeah, absolutely. I won't mention the joke, but it makes me think of an old Dane Cook joke. I'll just say thanks for the candy. But yeah. I mean, it can be hard to get rejected, or the fear of rejection, I think, is harder than actually being rejected itself. But it doesn't have to always be that way. It's the same thing with playing a game. You might lose, but the fear of losing is going to make you play worse than actually, performing that. But then also, on your point, how you present yourself, that's going to help you. So you meet someone, just because you get rejected, you don't tell them off or anything like that. But then also, and this is for like any of the coaches too, if your matches are being streamed, that is an opportunity for you to save that towards like your portfolio, so to speak. If you're doing post analysis, or you're on commentary at some point, or you're on an interview, those are ways that you can kind of capture yourself in like a unique way. So you have to, in my opinion, get creative about how you present yourself, because that's ever changing. How people get jobs nowadays is so different from how we used to get jobs. It's not just a resume nowadays. It's how's your social media presence. It's how are you presenting yourself online. What are your morals and your ethics versus the company that you're applying for. So I think it's a multifaceted aspect, but I think just thinking about it from different angles is very good to do. But okay, so thank you for that question, by the way. That was a really good one. Are there any other questions before we start diving into the online questions? Sweet.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
My name is Logan. I'm on the Overwatch club team. I'm a student here at WMU. I kind of have an issue of trying to match my schoolwork with my gaming, and trying to like make sure I have time for both, or trying to find which one I want to use at what time. Like if I want to de-stress, do gaming, or if I want to work hard in my studies, do that. I've tried to like schedule myself, and it's really difficult. Do you have any idea like good ways that you know of how to like schedule that, or tactics to like make that more effective?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. I can't imagine being a student and a gamer at the same time. I've worked with more student athletes than like traditional athletes than I have with student gamers, but I feel like the principles are pretty similar in terms of time management and the need to be pulled in different directions. I want to advocate, of course, that you prioritize your studies so that they're done in a good way, but I would say that making sure that we're most effective with our time. So it's not just necessarily the buckets of time, but within them, and I could say this as a PhD research student. There's times where I'm highly effective as a student with my time, and there's times that I'm not as effective. So some things that we do are constant check-ins. When I'm working with a student, let's say, every 45 minutes that bell goes off so they can check to see if they're still on their track of what they're trying to accomplish. Make sure they didn't go off into some weird reference and now they're on one paragraph of their paper when they could have written 3 pages, let's say, right? So making sure that we're highly effective with our time. So not just the buckets of it, but really being specific on what we want to accomplish within that. And I would say that the passive time, we have to be mindful of that. So if you said, well, I look at my day and there is an hour a day that I'm kind of wasting, but I think it's because I'm stressed out or I don't, my transitions between getting home from school and getting to the PC. And there are windows. There's windows of time throughout the schedule in between different events and making sure that we close an event and open event. We talk about it as beginnings and endings and being really intentional with what those look like. It's difficult to, I could sit down with you like as a patient and look at your calendar and say, hey, here's some room. But I would say being incredibly intentional with how the beginning of something begins and the ending of it. And what you might do in review, let's say at the end of a day, is look back and go, man, those hours I spent studying, they were mostly effective, but would have been more effective if I was thinking about accomplishing this at the beginning of that study block, right? So unfortunately, you're not going to have a lot of time for passive education or passive playing. It's going to have to be more formal, as I would define it, and really having the system to be able to manage that. But kind of like good luck, man. It's being a gamer and a student, or being a student athlete. Those are 2 full-time jobs that you're sandwiching into the same work schedule. So burnout and sleep schedule and all of that. Pretty complex subject.
Thank you.
Don't know if I helped you, but nice talking to you about the subject.
Yeah, thanks for the question. All right, anybody else? So good questions so far. I really appreciate that. Cool. So if you have more questions, you can go ahead and just have a seat there. We'll talk about some of the questions I have here from Twitch if we have time, and then also just other ideas. So there's tons of questions to be asked if we don't have any more in person. But one I think is good, and I've been trying to do this as we talk. But can you talk on correct posture when playing games?
I don't make a lot of recommendations on correct posture when you're gaming. Feeling comfortable the way you play is really important. I've seen pro gamers that have their legs folded up in Indian style on their chair. I've seen guys that kind of slouching a little bit. If Nitro ever listens to this, I'm talking about you, Nick. But it's good to engage. It's good to have a posture of like ready and engagement, right? So we could talk ergonomics, we could talk spinal position and hand and arm position, but I would say I'm more interested in what the gamer is doing outside of it to correct their poor posture in the gaming. Every person that's sitting right now, we're closing off our hip flexors, and humans are not meant to have their legs bent like this all the time. If you put your feet up like this, you're engaging your hamstrings. You need to have your feet flat on the floor if you don't want to engage your hamstrings. I actually had a player last year who had a hamstring issue that was lingering, and it's because he put his feet like this on his chair while he played. Yeah, and once we did this, his hamstring problem went away because he was elongating his legs. So it's not necessarily just while you're seated. I think the pros appreciate that I don't tell them, hey, you should try sitting like this, or I don't bring in a physical therapist or a chiropractor to change the way that they're seated. But we do work on the spinal health and flexibility and hip mobility in between practices and at the end of the day. So, there are Secret Labs does a lot. My friend Dr. Jordan over there does a lot of ergonomics education, and I think it's important stuff. Same thing with like grip mouse and those type of practices. But I try not to adjust that too much. It'd be kind of like me walking in and saying, your batting stance should be more like this, or you should shoot more like this right away. That's not really my specialty. But I do think it's important that you're aware of it. And if you notice that you're starting to live like this or develop a hunchback, those are things to address. And there's a lot of practices. You can lay your head on the edge of the bed. You can put your feet over the edge of the bed to elongate your hamstrings. You can do, I have a ring that I bring. It's this big circle thing that's hollow in the middle, and it's basically a foam roller for your spine. So we have guys roll on that. Meet with chiropractors, work out. I mean, there's a lot of things. But I typically don't come in the room and say, hey, your posture looks like junk while you're playing. Change it. Yeah, you got to feel good when you're playing.
So I have some experience in this actually because during the pandemic I got so lazy that like my body started hurting, and like getting older and body pains, it's like a cause of concern. So for like me, my neck and my back were hurting really bad, and my hip was like a big issue for me. So I went through physical therapy for a lot of that and got some exercises, and then I also started seeing a chiropractor for that as well. And there's a lot of takeaways, but one of the big ones that relates to what you're talking about is my chiropractor didn't really stress on the posture itself. I wish I could remember the term. I kind of feel bad. But he talked about the opposing direction. So like if you're hunched over a lot, essentially, you want to make sure at some point you're counterbalancing that by stretching. So rather than just fixing the posture, because I think in some ways, if you try to have good posture but aren't like engaging the right areas, you might do more harm than good.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So what we're not necessarily trying to make the adjustment during the session, we're counterbalancing the adjustment. Yeah. Yeah. And that's pretty standard practice. So if you feel like there's some room for growth there, I think that's good. Want to hit some of these?
Yep. All right. So this one was kind of like a three-part question that I'm trying to combine into kind of a two-part question. And I'll let you kind of interpret it how you would like as well. But the first part of the question is, how often should we practice? But then also, what does mental and physical training look like as a team?
So how much you should practice that's a tough one to answer, because that's going to be team-specific, game-specific. I would say if you want to be at the top of any craft, you're going to be putting in a lot of hours. So I would suggest that probably more hours than people think at the top of the food chain there. We're constantly getting our guys to try to play more hours. So that's a tough one. What was the second part of that?
What does mental and physical training look like?
Oh, as a team for mental and physical training. So not to throw the word holistic back in here, but it's going to depend on, I hate to say like physically, let's say your weakest link. If I have a team full of guys that all want to be in the gym, they all want to be playing squash, for instance, like Yakinder and Ultimate are good squash players. So if those guys want to go play squash, we're going to go play squash. So that's kind of a subset of the team. But just like any team, if you think like to being on a soccer team when you're a little kid, the slowest kid on the team is how you're running your little drills, right? It's kind of like that in professional gaming, so that you're probably taking a few players and doing something specific with them. But in terms of team activity, it might look like kicking a soccer ball. I've become known for having what's called a neuro ball, and it's just a light ball that you could kick around like a children's ball, but it has a bunch of numbers and letters on it. And so we'll throw that around before the match and call out the numbers and letters, and so that's for eye-hand coordination. We might do some what's considered Formula One drills, where you're dropping tennis balls and doing those type of things. I have some drills on paper where you're engaging the different lobes of the brain, where one hand is doing something. It's kind of like patting your head and rubbing your belly, if you will. So there might be some things like that. Most teams are kicking around a ball. I saw somebody try it out there. Yeah. I saw most teams are kicking around a ball or going for team walks. I'd say it's rare but really special when you have a group that all want to be in the gym together or are all saunaing together. But we'll usually find like 4 out of the 5 or 3 out of the 5 that want to do those activities. So we focus on those. And then to kind of like make sure we catch everybody. There's stretching routines we do as a team. There are team activation sessions. So if you look at our calendar, it will say activation with Edward, which is going to be about a 15 to 20 minute start of our day. Where as a team, we go outside, you're getting the light, we're moving around, we're using our voice, we're engaging each other. There's some physical movement and stretching. But typically speaking, this is esports. This isn't, pro basketball. So not everyone's going to have a physical fitness strength training program that's the same. But some of my guys do. It just varies per team. So if you find a team that they all love kicking around a soccer ball, a lot of these teams are European. So soccer ball, a football is pretty common. So we'll usually do that or shoot hoops, or there's something that's involved where you're doing movement as a group.
Nice.
I had another thought. Also, diet together. You know, nutrition together, drinking electrolytes together, going out for team meals, and everyone kind of eating healthy or dodging the desserts, or taking supplements together. You know, my teams will take something for cognitive performance, right? Some alpha brain type supplements, some ashwagandha or nootropics, or reishi mushrooms, or, you know, there's all these different, lion's mane's a great one, turkey tail, yeah. So all these different supplements. So it's not just like movement. I mean, we're talking about video gaming, and you have to engage the body, but it's also engaging the mind. So maybe we'll play a creative game or something for them to kind of engage their creativity. So there are things, but individual and collective. Yeah, we do both.
I got kind of a follow-up question to that, actually. I'm going to forget it if I don't ask it now, but you've already alluded to this in a way, but what are some ways to build team camaraderie outside of the game?
They have to have fun together. They have to enjoy spending time together. We're living on the road together. So for us, it's so much about that free time, making sure that you have independent free time, but then also individual, like one-on-one time with your teammates. So we go for walks. We make sure that we have team emptying the backpack sessions, which some teams really enjoy them and do them frequently. Some teams don't like them as much, where we're talking about our experiences together. We're talking about if we're having fun, what the workday looks like, how each other are making each other feel. And sometimes you get some interesting things in there where they say, I'm not having fun with this guy, or I don't like the way we're talking to each other. And I shy away from the term family because we're in a work environment. We're being paid to do what we do, but you're on the road so much with these people, more than you're seeing your family. They see each other a lot more than they see their spouses or significant others, for instance, or parents. So for them, it is a family type atmosphere. So we make sure that they get some breaks. You're walking away because you're going to fight with your siblings. You're going to fight with your brothers. So we make sure they get away from it. We take them away from the server. You've got to first do something as a person. Forget doing some stuff as a teammate until you've done something as a person. And those are meals and having fun together. And my guys last night, I was seeing all the videos. They're in Singapore right now, and they're doing really cool stuff in Singapore, and sightseeing and shows and all kinds of cool stuff. So living your life with each other and enjoying each other's company. I think that's the basis. You start as a person, and then you work on your gamer relationship. But having that friendship will show up on the server. So really cultivating that friendship. And when it's not going well and the working relationship's a struggle, you're grabbing me and having a discussion about it.
One last follow-up question. This is for people like myself who are either college coaches or directors. Obviously, we don't have the budget to have a traditional coach in one of you. So for the people in our position, what advice would you have for the college students, and like where do we fall into that involving like the team chemistry?
It's a good question, yeah. And even some pro teams don't have someone like me, or maybe I'm not there at the event at that time, right? I'm not there right now. This falls on every individual. So what I like to tell the team when they're starting is every person in this room is accountable for their experience. It's not my job to make sure you're healthy and have a good time. It's not your coach's job to make sure you're treating each other well. Everybody is responsible for their experience. And so when we have a win, you're responsible for it. When we have a loss, you're responsible for it. When things aren't going well, you're responsible for it. And everybody's been in a relationship. Everyone has a friend or someone that they know that something isn't going well and they don't mention it. And it just ruins that relationship. So it's on them as individuals to maintain that relationship. It's not the mental health coach's job to come in and make sure they're still being kind to one another. That comes from internal. So I think it's a self-responsibility on each person to make sure it's a fun environment and that you're enjoying going to work. I mean, imagine getting paid money to play video games for a career. I mean, you better be having a good time. You're in nice hotels, you're traveling. So I'd say the same thing if you're a student at Western Michigan University. I had a great time here. I was just playing video games for fun with my buddies in the dorms. But I had a great time here. But I wasn't waiting for someone else to make me have fun. Just like if you have a buddy who stinks as a student, if you're spending your time with that guy, you're probably going to flunk out. I remember a couple guys that flunked out my freshman year at Western, and they were having a good time together, but they flunked out together, right? So surround yourself with the people that you want to be like and emulate, and take responsibility for the energy in the room. And that's something that does come from the top, I believe, but it's an individual thing. So if you're a coach of a high school or collegiate program, and you say, man, my guys aren't having fun, make sure they understand the accountability and self-responsibility. It's on them to make sure they do that, and then you create the environment and container for it to exist. And that's a daily thing. You're coming in and establishing that daily.
Thank you. I could go more on that, but I'm going to go to the next question here because this one is one that I like talking about. So I'm curious to know what you have to say on this one. So the question itself is, how do you deal with gamer aggression, tilt, or frustration?
Yeah, my first question is, do they experience this in their normal life? Right? Is this normal when things don't go as planned? Do they get really upset if the guy in front of them cuts them off? Are they flicking them off and screaming at them in traffic? See some people turning heads. So, I mean, whatever you are, there's a beautiful analogy, and this has really been trending lately online, so maybe you've heard this recently, but if you're walking down the hallway and holding a cup of coffee and someone bumps into you, you're going to spill out that coffee. If it was tea that was in that cup and someone bumps into you, you're going to spill out tea. And it's the same thing about who you are emotionally as a person. Things aren't going to go as planned. Someone's going to bump into you in life. Things are going to go unexpectedly. And what we see is what we have on the inside when we're bumped. So if when you're bumped in life, anger comes out, then that's what's inside of your cup. If when you're bumped in life, love comes out or compassion comes out, then that's what's inside your cup. So when you're bumped and you get to notice this is what you spill out, that's where the shadow work, as we like to say in my practice, that's where that comes into place. And you get to start exploring that. And if you have someone like me, great. If you don't, start reading and studying and meditating and learning online. The internet has all the tools you need. But play witness to yourself. And when we're talking about mindfulness, what we're talking about is non-judgment observation. So when someone says, I want to do this mindfully, they're saying to do it without judgment. So if I'm asking you to review how you behaved today over the course of your practice, and you notice, man, today I actually got really upset at one of my teammates, and I stopped communicating the next map or next scrimmage because I was so annoyed with my teammate, and I was really angry and wanted to punch something, then that's what we explore. Then let's honor those feelings. And if you view those feelings with a sense of judgment, and you're mad about having those feelings, then that's not doing it mindfully. So the first thing we want to do is step away from it. I have a player that I worked with last year who did really well. He's not one of my current players, so don't try to read into this, but he was having anger problems with his teammates and throwing fits with his teammates. And we had to really devise a process of witnessing him without judgment so that he could get to the root of it. And so the first thing is to step away from that judgment component, because you're going to have guilt and stress. I can say this as a parent. If my sons do something that I don't want them to do, and I react with anger, that's my problem, not theirs. And we have to look and see what we're spilling out of our cup when we're bumped.
I got a couple of things I want to add on to that. So one, I do want to share my definition of tilting because I think it'll be helpful just for clarification for people listening at home or for you guys. The way that I explain tilting to people, especially like parents, is a mental or emotional state where you're not performing at your optimal. Because there's something going on that makes it to where you're not playing at your best. Right, that you can't handle, exactly. Yeah, so whatever it is, whether it's emotional, whether it's like a mental, like you're distracted, I consider being like distracted. Like for me, I'm like, go squirrel. I would put that in the realm of tilted because you're not playing at your optimal. But in terms of like, more so traditional tilt, which is being angry and to the point to your detriment, right? Well, on one end, you're spiking controllers and stuff like that and getting the anger out. But on the other end, there are people who, when they're mad, they're not playing their best. And I think that's like the core thing is that there are some people who know, and I have seen this, and I've got stories of this, of just people who get so mad that they're just like losing it, and they're not really like, they're playing really predictably, they're not really like if it's a team-based game, they're taking on their teammates and everything. And I think that oh my God, there's so much to talk about with this topic, but one, I want to know what you think about like that definition in itself, but also in terms of that frustration and that mindset for me, and I want to know your thought on this, is I think a big part of why people get frustrated is not so much the emotion itself, but their thought process.
So tilt comes when you have an expectation of something happening and it doesn't happen. And that is, again, bumping into the cup, right? And what's going to spill out is that tilt. So I would say I have a tough time with the definition of like not being your best version of yourself, because I think it's rare for us to peak perform. I think peak performance is really rare. it requires a very specific set of things to take place, both physically, environmentally, and mentally. And I'm coming out of the Russian 1970s education model of what like a flow state of awareness is, right? So there are a lot of things that have to be in a specific place, but anger and frustration and even that consciousness of those feelings does not allow someone to reach a flow state. A flow state is almost like the mind takes a secondary spot to what the body's going through. So in that, with respect to that, you cannot be in a flow state if you're tilting at all, right? So to that degree, of course. But in terms of still performing well, you're going to have frustrations and still be able to perform very well. I mean, frustrations are going to happen. It's your opponent's job to make you frustrated. That's what we're here to do. So in any discipline that is competitive, your opponent's job is to make your life miserable. So if your opponent did any of their work, it should be frustrating to play against them. So tilt for me is an inability of processing that unexpected experience, or an inability of processing your feelings and emotions in real time so that you can do what you actually wanted to do. It's getting in your own way. And if you're getting in your own way, I would define that as tilt, sure.
Yeah, well said. Yep, and then I see Leland, you have a question over there?
Yeah. I am a student, PhD student. I am very interested in the relationship between exercise and e-sport performance. So my question is, would you provide more information about the role that physical activity or exercise is playing in players' daily routine, and like accept mindset, and also the building up relationship between teammates. So is there any specific specific exercise are used to improve players cognitive performance, or just generally e-sport performance?
Sure.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you.
good luck to your studies, and thank you for the question. I would say that, first off, we have to acknowledge that we probably can't do a general fitness thing for everybody. It has to be individualized. And I would say once we identify what that player needs or what is best suited for them, physically speaking, you will see return from that. Now, the science of this, as I'm sure you understand, we see a wonderful response from physical fitness. And as I said earlier, it almost doesn't matter what you do. You know, if you take somebody that does a very specific long hour training program and you put them through the first 6 minutes of that training program, the chemicals released are something, I can't remember the exact study, but it's something like 65% of the chemicals are already released as if they were to do an hour-long training program, right? So the benefit from it, especially in video gaming, I'm not talking about somebody that's putting in an hour-and-a-half training session and really growing their muscle. I'm talking about somebody that's just doing anything. There is going to be benefit from it. Now, the problem that I have as a research student is how do we triangulate that away from their sleep schedule, their relationship that they had and how they were up all night fighting with a girlfriend, right? And how are we going to really identify if that workout was highly effective in conjunction to the other things that they were doing, right? Because it has to be a piece of a lot of the puzzle. So I would say it's incredibly important. Not every gamer is doing it. And it has to be individualized. It can't be, there's gamers that are doing Olympic lifting and bodybuilding, and there's gamers that are doing yoga, and there's gamers that are doing circuit training and HIIT training. And I'm not in a position to say that any one of them are best for video gaming. I think it depends on the physiological needs of that individual. And so I would say that the first thing is not to, as a practitioner perhaps, that's going from academia to practicing, is to not take something that's philosophical and try to put it into position of everyone should do it. And I do see that with practitioners that are coming to esports for the first time and they have a model, something maybe they've published or researched, and they say this is the way that video gamers could develop their strength, and it's through this routine. And I caution them that you're not going to have 100% buy-in, and it's going to be difficult because some gamers just can't do that. This is video gaming, it's not professional athletics. So some just have different physical limitations. Some gamers have very serious physical conditions and limitations, and they're unable to exercise. I have several gamers who literally can't break a sweat. They're not allowed to conditionally. So it's going to make a big difference. And as a researcher, to me, it depends on their diet, it depends on their sleep cycle, it depends on their relationships. So to isolate something as specific as a training program is very difficult because it might not be applicable. Yeah. And I kind of say that like as a research student that's trying to do the same thing. I'm trying to look at heart rate variability training and to see if, based on their heart rate variability status, how that correlates to their outcome and performance. And even then, I have to consider all the other variables too. It can't be just one channel. Health is too complex. Yeah. That's the struggle we have as research students. We find something that we think works, we find a way to prove it, and then they say, well, what about sleep? You go, well, that's not part of my study. Yeah. So it's difficult. Yeah. I would say the great side of this, though, is that most gamers have something that they're planning on doing now. And so they're open to it. Whereas 7-8 years ago, when you talked to them about physical fitness, they didn't have much of an appreciation for it and didn't know if it was necessary. But now they feel like it's necessary. Thank you. Yeah, we can nerd out later on the research of it. Yeah.
I might be part of that conversation. Yeah. I'll probably discuss that a little bit later on. Were there any other questions from you guys? Otherwise, I'll read on to the next one. And then if we can get someone from production to bring down some of the Twitch questions you want to ask, I'll grab some here, but I also want to get some student input. On time, we might have to grab a couple. Yeah. In the meantime, I'll ask this question and I'll search for some other strong questions and see if the chat has any recommendations from the students. Because I'm a generation removed. I don't want me to be the one picking all of them. But this one is can you discuss esports contracts with players and staff work, endorsements, sponsorships, and salary as well? Now, this isn't your wheelhouse, so I don't expect you to have all the answers or anything, but I wonder if you can speak on that.
I mean, I'm familiar with what my players make and what their contract situation. I actually get asked this quite a bit by players. So some players have agents, some players are doing this on their own, or they have a friend or family member that helps them navigate this. Some players talk to someone like me or someone at the organization that might help them navigate this. Players are generally speaking signed to 1, 2, or 3-year deals, and some of them make really good money. Some of them make pretty good money of the ones that I work with. Their contracts are usually incentive-based, where if they perform really well, they receive more money. If they win the major or something, they're going to make a commission on that. But yeah, it's generally tied to their performance, and they can be fired at any time if they stink. And if they break the rules of the organization, they can be let go and terminated from the contract. But it's actually a really kind of tough subject because a lot of the guys come into the pro level without ever having to consider any of that. And I've seen gamers taken advantage of. I've seen guys that are making $2,000 a month where their teammate next to them who's not as good is making $20,000 a month. And it's because they didn't understand to have a lawyer look at that contract and ask for more money. So this is a new industry. The people that are running the businesses have a lot more experience in setting up contracts and things. So I would say, just generally speaking, if you're going to sign a contract, you need to read every word of it, first off. You'd be surprised how often that doesn't happen. And have someone that's a lawyer or somebody take a look at it too. You can set yourself up really well or really kind of hose yourself depending on the agents that you're working with, the people around you. So, yeah. But yeah, a lot of these guys are making great money. They might have some endorsement deals. Some of them you're not allowed to have. Like for instance, our company at Liquid, we're sponsored by Monster Energy. So and they wear Monster on their jersey, on our jersey. So if they had a Red Bull deal, that Red Bull wanted to pay them, they couldn't do that, for that team. So it does depend on the organization, and every organization has affiliations and marketing relationships. So you have to work within the confines of that. And some orgs are really cool about it and say, hey, if you can make money on the side, go for it. So you might get a deal for Hyper headset or something. Or I've seen my players on the billboards at Best Buy and stuff, and they did that on their own. So if you have a good agent, they can help you with a lot of things like that. But yeah, the contracts are a serious topic. This is legal stuff, and you need to have a lawyer and talk to some people about it. Don't get yourself in trouble. Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. Did you have a question? I did. Yep, go for it. Definitely get the people in-house to ask some questions.
I tried to write it down because it's a bit wordy. Did you have any advice for how to manage a competitive drive to win while still investing yourself in progressing and competing and attaining results without becoming like a detriment to your self-worth?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I think first is, when are we going to assess the outcome of this project? Right? So if we're assessing every scrimmage by whether I won or lost, it's going to be really stressful, and I'm not going to keep developing. So I think we have to make sure that we're keenly aware that we're assessing what we just did based on the metrics of what we said we were going to assess. And I'll give you a for instance. We go into a scrimmage saying we are going to practice these 3 things. We're going to practice a new strategy on B. We're going to practice a new setup on over here. We're going to try our mid-round calling. And then after the match, after the scrimmage, we get together and we say, how did this go? And people go, it stunk. We got our butts kicked. That was annoying. The other team was doing this and this and this. And we don't even talk about the 3 things that we said we were going to try to accomplish in this scrimmage. Now we're looking at it as an outcome, and we're assessing it differently than our intention was. So same thing in life. If your intention is to do something, you're going to go to the gym and do this and this and this. When you leave, you need to assess whether or not you met that intention. So there needs to be a clear intention of what you're trying to accomplish. And some days that's winning. Some days it's we're going to play this scrimmage like it's do or die for our lives. We're going to play it like it's a stage match. And some days it's to learn something. So let's make sure that our assessing model is aligning with our intention model. And if we notice that there's a gap there could be frustration from that, because we're not clearly identifying what the intention is. And so when we're assessing on something that's not aligned with the intention, and you will see frustration from that, and then burnout on all the other things. So I would say before you begin something, make sure there's a very clear intention, and then when we're done with it, before we get wrapped up into the emotions and the feelings of it, you can acknowledge those, but then let's make sure that we're going back to that intention and assessing based on what we were trying to get out of it. Right?
Yeah.
Hopefully that's a little helpful.
No, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Nice. Also, shout out to the Kalamazoo FGC. Thank you guys for showing up. So I'm curious about one of these questions. I'm not sure if I know the gamer tag, but we got Jay over here.
I was going to add one more in-person question,
Sure.
if I could. So it's something where I don't know if you may have experience with this working in environments like Liquid, where they have a bunch of teams. They have a league team, a WoW team, another type of WoW team, CS team, all sorts of stuff. I was wondering, do those teams tend to interact? Do you find benefits from having like cross-title interactions between players where they can sort of share ideas? And if so, or even if not, how would you recommend that be implemented some more at our level with our type of events?
It's a really cool question. And you actually just hit the nail on the head of something I've worked on this week. At Liquid, we had this Movember event that I led for the organization this week. And on that Movember call, I met some other performance coaches at Liquid that I have never even talked to before. And they're in other titles. So it's a really apropos question given my week of work I just had. I would say some organizations are better at doing this than others. I'll give you an example. When I was at 100 Thieves, all of the games that we had were in the same building in Los Angeles. At Team Liquid, we have an office in Los Angeles, we have an office in the Netherlands, and we have an office in Brazil. And so the likelihood that Los Angeles and the Netherlands are doing much together, they're sleeping while you're awake. So it makes it really challenging. So you have some organizations that are working in silos, and every single department is kind of broken up. You see this in corporations as well, where different departments don't even have a clue who the other people are. So there's certain ways that we cross-pollinate, if you will, through departments. Something that we found really effective at Liquid last year is having some engagement, like a player from this team talking to that coach talking to that player, and not even in a real formal setting. Just, what do you guys do over there? How does it work? What are your challenges? And we have had some success where a League of Legends coach gives a good idea to a Counter-Strike player, or an analyst on Valorant talks to the League of Legends player. So those moments, now they have to be set up. You have to be very intentional with setting those up. They don't happen organically. I've never heard a player say, yeah, I just reached out to the League of Legends staff just to have a chat, right? So I think they have to be structured and set up from the top, but I do see tremendous value there. And I think anytime that you're working in a performance setting where you're getting the same people in the room and same topics, to grab something from outside really can be beneficial. I've done that. When I was at G2, I experienced that. They have a really good performance coach for their League of Legends department. And when I was getting onboarded for Counter-Strike, they were kind of saying, what do you want to do in Counter-Strike? And I kind of run my own show, so I kind of was giving them some ideas of what I would do. And then I went into the League of Legends practice room and saw some of the things they did and said, man, I really like some of these things. So I think when we're willing to take best practices, it can be really helpful. If we're just trying to prove that we're good in what we do, it's not as helpful. But certainly with a growth mindset, I think that cross-department work is really beneficial. I see that sometimes like a good CEO. I worked for a CEO who had 170,000 employees, the CEO that I worked with. And he would say, about once a month he's grabbing lunch from a random guy around the world that's one of his employees that he would never meet, just asking him, what is it like to work here, right? And so I think even those questions, department to department, like, how do you guys start your day? How do you recap your day? What's going really well? I see organizations go for years without having those conversations cross-department. So I think it's a great question, and I'm a big advocate for it. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, I think also it made me think about something too, not just as a player, but as facilitators, directors, coaches. One of the things I enjoy is talking to my coaches, my League of Legends coach Zach. I like hearing about his approach to the game, and I get ideas about how to approach my game. I never really consciously thought about it because I'm just a nerd for learning, but learning about Valorant as well from both Val and Miles. Learning about Overwatch from Coach Evan and Jason. It's that cross-pollination isn't just beneficial for players, is what I'm trying to say. It's actually really cool to be able to learn from other games, and some things are just not going to be applicable, but other things, you might get some insights as a facilitator and as a player. So if you're wearing multiple hats like some of us do, I think there's many benefits. That's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add on real quick, even looking at their team schedule. I'll have one team look at our schedule and they'll go, oh, what's this that you guys have there? And we say, oh, well, we do that as a group. We go for a little walk. Oh, wow, okay. So the organizational structure, I mean, in a corporation, they have standard operating procedures, SOPs. If you're the HCOB, SOPs, I mean, there's all these things. So some organizations like Liquid, even though they have a really robust performance department, we brought in a new coach recently and we said, how do you like to do things? What are your SOPs? The performance staff says, well, here's some of ours, here's some of yours, here's Edward's, and we start meshing them together. And then we go to the League of Legends department, we see theirs are totally different. They have a totally different set of schedule, and they use different docs, and they're on Discord, of course, but they use different for everything. And so you see you're always learning. There's still a better practice. So as long as you're open to that, yeah, it's not just for players and routines and health practices. It's for standard operating procedures too, and it's really important. I see org owners, they dip in every now and then. They go, oh, you guys have this scheduled like this? Well, our Valorant team does it this way. So yeah, the organizations really care about it too. It's important that it's difficult when you're a global company to feel like you're all on the same team. It's really difficult to create that. So there has to be people that are instilling that type of practice and formality. Good question.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. So I think we went through most of the questions on our list. I know we had some Twitch questions, and maybe we can rapid fire some of those. Yeah. I saw a couple of good ones, and then Tristan, did you have any that you have on your list to ask?
Why don't we do 3? We'll do this gentleman and then 2 off there, and we'll call it a night.
Cool. Yep.
This question is coming straight from the Twitch chat. How effective is the mindset of being unattached to the results? Not a lack of caring, but just being present and focused on the task in hand. And how does that relate to the flow state?
Well, this feels like one of my staff members asked this question, like they're baiting me. Being present in the moment is incredibly important, and not being attached to the outcome is incredibly important. I mean, if you think, we mentioned sales earlier today. If you've ever had a salesperson talk to you that you could tell they were just trying to get the sale, we've all done that, right? We've all been somewhere where someone's walk into a car dealership that you just want to look at a car, and it's they're, please buy the car, right? They're hounding you. So being associated with the outcome takes you away from the experience completely. So, and if you're focused on winning, we can't, you don't achieve anything by being focused on the outcome. The outcome is the result. So I'd say caring a lot about the outcome is important. I want gamers that really want to win. And you can't almost make that important enough. I'm not going to tell them that you care too much about winning. That's great if they really care. So put that off to the side and then focus. Focus on the actual work. So, and if I have somebody that, for instance, League of Legends is a good example for this. Sometimes League of Legends players, I'm thinking some of my Korean guys in particular, maybe they didn't do all the things that they should have or could have done to get themselves in a position to win, and then the loss really hurts them. And I think part of the reason the loss hurts is because they know they didn't do everything they could have done to put themselves into that position. So from that end, a disassociation from the outcome, I'd say, yeah, it's pretty valuable to the individual that is focused and doing the good work. If the individual is not focused on doing the good work, maybe I could stress that the outcome is really important so they elevate into their performance. But in terms of flow state and peak performance, you don't peak perform because you cared the most about the win. That's not why you peak perform. You peak perform the most because you're in the present moment and experiencing it truly and all-encompassing. Every part of you is experiencing it. So in that, nothing in the future exists, and the outcome's in the future. So it can't be a part of a flow state. I have to imagine if you talk to anybody that's experienced flow state, they weren't outcome-oriented at all. They had no concept that there was going to be an outcome to this experience, whether it's ballet, baseball, or video games. It doesn't make a difference. So if you're truly engrossed in what you're doing, the outcome of it doesn't exist. The next moment doesn't exist. And if you're into that kind of discussion, join me in being a Ram Dass student and learn about be here now and really stop living in the past or dwelling in ideas of the future and just be present. Yeah, great question.
Thank you, TurboBeak, for this question in the Twitch chat.
Nice. Shots on. No, we're good. We're good. Yeah, I think he had it muted. Yeah, another member of the Kalamazoo FGC, actually. So thank you for that question. So pick your best two. Yep. I see one here from Double. This one is how would you first assess assessment look when you join a new team, and how would it progress? So I think what he's saying is like, how do you first assess the players on the team and the team as a whole, and then like what are your first steps for that?
Was the question from Double, you said?
Yeah.
From Double A with an A at the end, or no? Just trying to see if it's somebody I know. Oh, okay, all right. So in terms of assessing a player, certainly in terms of their technical ability for the video game, that's nothing to do with me. So I'll kind of leave that for people that know the games. I don't know what I'm looking at when I'm watching the guys play the game. I don't know who's great or not. But in terms of their maybe practices and getting themselves prepared for it, we do very extensive intakes every time that we join a new team, just like you would if you were working with a practitioner and going through a health intake. And that involves everything from their poops to how they deal with people and anger and everything in between. So we really do dive into them as a person and make sure we're supporting all of their needs: mental needs, physical needs, nutritional needs, lifestyle needs. And then how do they get along with others? How are they working as a team? That's a really important thing to understand. So learning whether or not they're leaders or how well they communicate. Usually at this level, you have some insight of that already from other teams or other team managers who maybe you've interviewed with. But we go through thorough intakes and asking them who they want to be and what type of gamer they want to experience. And then generally have an understanding of what's needed at the team level to have success. So making sure that they're capable of supplying that. So I mean, if we're talking like physical fitness, there's intakes and assessments. If we're talking diet, there's blood work. If we're talking about mental health, we put them through different mental health tests and assessments. And so we're gathering a lot of data, and then we sift through the data and come up with a plan that's best to support them. I mean, but it is pretty structured process, interview process, testing them filling out questionnaires, all kinds of fun stuff. Yeah.
Nice. All right, and then final question. This is actually from a fellow Bronco, graduated here, I think last year, if I'm not mistaken. But when you're in a career with a varying day-to-day schedule like esports, what are effective strategies to install and keep good regular routines and habits? And then kind of as a follow-up is, how do you keep those going when you might not have enough free time?
Well, good question. In terms of the second part, so if you don't have enough free time, you need to adapt to them. So if you're someone who said, I was going to go to the gym, but tomorrow I don't have enough free time, then what are you doing instead? Is that push-ups? Is that stretching? Is that, some jumping jacks? Or what is it? What are you doing instead? Because you still have to check the box. So again, if we're aligning our intention with our action, then it's going to be fine. So if you're running out of time, if I don't have time for a half-hour meditation, I have time for 3 breaths, right? We pare it down so that it can work. So we have to find out what that means. What was the first part of that? The first part was bigger. Oh, a varying day-to-day schedule in your career, yeah. So, and let's say that I'm at home this week, but next week I'm in Shanghai and living out of a hotel. So there's certain things that are still the same. I'm still going to wake up and have my morning mindfulness practice. I'm still going to check in with my intentions. I'm still going to make my bed. I'm still going to drink my first 32 ounces of green juice and electrolytes. So what I try to have gamers understand, especially those that are traveling or just living away from home in an apartment in LA, let's say, you want to replicate your home lifestyle as much as you can. You have to give yourself some normalcy. So whatever you do with your routines, you have to instill them day in and day out. Doesn't matter if it's a match day, a practice day, a hotel day, a at-home day, you know, a super dad day, or my kids are on the other side of the planet day. There are so many things that I'm still practicing individually or professionally and that the gamers are still going through to give them a resemblance of normalcy. And so it's important that we're maintaining that all the time. And I really like the idea of starting your day off by making your bed, getting your room set up. You know, you kind of clean up your corner of the world before you go out there and try to change the rest. And if you're doing that at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day through your personal hygiene, let's call it, practices to wind down, then at the very least your bookends are creating that normalcy. And from a neuro standpoint, we're really interested in creating that expectation and delivering it constantly. So I'd say most importantly from that end is creating that environment. What I like to tell my gamers, I don't know how many of them do this, sometimes we check their rooms, but you get to your hotel room, you completely unpack everything out of the suitcase. Set up the hotel room like you live here. You know, some people have a photo of significant others, or they've got the speaker in the room, so they're always listening to music, and the music is what they're listening to at home as well. So we want to create that environment that is reflective of what you want to experience at all times. And I don't care where you are or how much free time you have, if you're a student, or, you know, make your dorm room the way you want to, make your PC set up the way you want to, and be very serious and intentional with it. Don't treat it like it's a small thing. Treat it like it's really important. And then you'll elevate your floor of performance. But yeah, there has to be stability in that. So it doesn't matter where in the world you are, what you're doing. You still meditate, you still work out, you still move, you still prep for the day, still shower, still do all your hygiene stuff. So there's plenty of opportunities to make normalcy in your life. And before I hand over the mic again, just a shout out to thank you for everybody for being here, and really appreciate you coming out tonight and spending your time with us. And to all those that review this online, hello and wish you well. And thank you for being here, and thank you, Tavian, for putting this on, and to Western. And I'll always be a Bronco, so it's always nice to come back home and spend some time here with fellow Broncos. So thank you all very much, and I'll go back to you to wrap up, okay?
I'll give you one of these real quick. Thank you. Yeah, thank you to Edward for coming out here. I mean, it's just, I love having these conversations. You know, we've talked on Discord a couple times, and every time I feel like it's a podcast episode, we could give some quality to people for it. But nonetheless, thank you guys for coming out. I'm super happy with the number of questions that we had. We had a lot of really good questions that made me think about stuff. I learned a lot from the conversation, so hopefully you all did as well. Hopefully these conversations continue with each other, with me, with like other people that you might know in the industry. I also want to thank the production staff. Everyone here did a great job. You know, it's kind of stressful being here because I can't really do too much in terms of production, but my staff is amazing. They do a great job. And I can't really sing their praises enough. Also, shout out to University Recreation. That's the department we're under. I know you talked about running, so Turkey Trot's coming up as well. So if you're it's in a couple of weeks. It's in a couple of weeks. Yeah. So if you're in town, you know, and you like running, definitely check that out. But either way, if you guys are interested in what we do here, you know, we have our monthly fighting game tournaments. We have our live streams and different events. We have a match with Albion and Davenport in Rocket League tomorrow morning as well. So you guys can follow us on all the social media. It's pretty much all WMU Esports. So definitely, you know, whether you're in person, whether you're online, thank you guys so much for your support. Please join me in giving a big round of applause to Edward Cleland. All right. Thank you guys.